Hi guys, tonight we step into a world almost beyond memory, about 70,000 years ago, where the night is wide, the stars are sharp, and a small fire trembles against the cold. Around you, ancient people sit close together beneath a dark sky, wrapped in skins, listening to wind move through dry grass and distant trees. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what your local time is, because somewhere out there, another quiet room is settling into the same slow night. Now, dim the lights and let yourself arrive beside the fire. The first thing you notice is the darkness, not the soft darkness of a modern bedroom with curtains, walls, and a tiny glowing phone pretending it is not ruining your sleep. This darkness is older, deeper, and much more honest. It stretches across the land without street lamps, without windows, without the distant hum of traffic. Above you, the sky is crowded with stars, so bright they seem almost close enough to touch, as if the night itself has been stitched with cold silver thread. You sit near the edge of a small camp. The ground beneath you is firm and cool. Dry leaves press against your feet. A faint smell of smoke clings to your hair, your skin, your rough hide covering. The fire before you is not large, but it matters more than almost anything else here. It gives warmth, light, and a center. It tells the darkness, very politely, to stay back. 70,000 years ago, modern humans were already living across parts of Africa, carrying bodies and minds much like ours. Though their world was completely different, there were no farms, no cities, no written names, no metal tools, no roads. People survived by hunting, gathering, remembering, sharing, and moving through landscapes that could be generous one season and unforgiving the next. A mainstream historical fact is that Homo sapiens existed long before agriculture, and for most of human history, people lived as mobile hunter-gatherers rather than settled farmers. You breathe slowly and look around. The group is small, perhaps 20 people, perhaps fewer. A few children sleep close to adults. One elderly woman sits wrapped in a hide, her face lit softly by the fire. A man nearby turns a piece of wood in his hands, smoothing it with a stone flake. Someone else quietly checks a bundle of dry grass and kindling, making sure the fire will not die too quickly. No one moves in a hurry. At night, speed is not always helpful. Care is better. The air is cold enough that you feel it inside your nose when you inhale. It carries the smell of dust, smoke, animal hide, and distant water. Somewhere beyond the firelight, an insect clicks. Farther away, something larger shifts through the brush. No one panics. Heads lift. Eyes turn toward the sound. Then, after a few breaths, the camp relaxes again. This is how survival begins here, not with heroic speeches or dramatic music. Thankfully, since there is no soundtrack in the Pleistocene, it begins with attention. It begins with noticing small changes before they become large problems. Researchers continue to question exactly how early human groups organized their movements 70,000 years ago, especially across different regions and climates. Some evidence suggests flexible bands that shifted with water, plants, animals, and seasonal weather, while other interpretations emphasize deeper territories and remembered routes passed through generations. The truth may have varied from place to place, because human life has always been inconveniently complicated, even before paperwork existed. You watch a child stir in sleep. The child turns toward the warmth, one small hand open against the earth. Beside them, an adult gently pulls a hide closer around their shoulders. The gesture is simple, almost invisible, but it tells you something important. Survival is not only sharp spears and strong legs, it is also care in the dark. It is someone noticing that another body is cold. A lesser-known detail about hunter-gatherer life is that many survival skills were not dramatic at all. Knowing which wood smoked too much, which plant fibre twisted well into cord, where embers could be preserved, or how to carry water safely might matter as much as chasing large animals. These are not the kinds of things that usually get carved into museum headlines, but they kept people alive. Honestly, history often gives the spotlight to weapons, when the real hero may have been a good basket. The fire cracks softly. Sparks rise, fade, and vanish. You can feel heat on your face while your back remains cool. That contrast defines the night. Warmth in front of you, cold behind you, known space inside the glow, unknown space beyond it. A woman near the fire lifts a stone tool and studies its edge. The flake is small, but sharp enough to cut hide or meat. In her hands, it is not primitive. It is precise. It belongs to a world where every object has to earn its place. Nothing is bought casually. Nothing is replaced with a bored click on a screen. If something breaks, someone must know how to repair it, reshape it, or do without it. You hear low voices. They're not loud enough for you to understand clearly, but their rhythm is soothing. A phrase, a pause, a soft laugh, another pause. Language binds the camp together like invisible cord. It carries warnings, memories, teasing, grief, plans, and comfort. In a world without writing, the spoken word is not casual background noise. It is storage. It is map. It is instruction. It is home. You look past a circle of faces into the land beyond. This world is harsh, but not empty. There are grasses, shrubs, trees, insects, birds, hoofed animals, predators, rivers, stones, roots, shells, bones, and weather patterns older than any story. Humans are not separate from this world. They are woven into it. Every decision depends on understanding relationships, where animals drink, when fruits ripen, which direction smoke travels, where cold settles at night, how clouds gather before rain. The night deepens. Someone adds a small branch to the fire, not too much. Fuel must be saved. The branch catches slowly, then curls into flame. The light grows warmer for a moment, touching cheekbones, hands, sleeping faces, the curve of a hide bag, the pale edge of stone. You feel the camp become slightly more visible, as if memory itself has leaned closer, and you begin to understand something quiet. To survive 70,000 years ago, humans did not need to conquer nature in the modern sense. They needed to listen to it. They needed to cooperate with each other, remember what worked, teach the young, respect danger without living in constant fear, and carry enough hope to step into tomorrow. The fire lowers again. The stars remain overhead. You sit among these ancient people, feeling the cold ground beneath you and the slow warmth against your palms. Behind every breath is uncertainty, but also skill. Behind every shadow is risk, but also knowledge. And inside this small ring of firelight, where the night presses close and the group rests together, humanity continues, quietly, carefully. One night at a time, the fire is still low when you begin to notice the shape of the camp more clearly. At first, it seemed like only a circle of warmth in a wide, dark world. Now, as your eyes adjust, small details rise out of the night. A few branches have been arranged as windbreaks. Hides are stretched over simple frames. Bundles of tools rest near sleeping bodies, close enough to grab if needed, but not so close that someone rolls over and meets a stone blade in the dark, which would be a very poor start to anyone's morning. The camp is temporary, but it is not careless. People 70,000 years ago lived in a world without permanent houses as we understand them today. They did not build streets, courtyards, or fenced fields. Their homes were often made from what the landscape allowed: branches, hides, grasses, stones, bones, caves, rock shelters, or open-air camps positioned near water and food. A mainstream historical fact is that early humans depended heavily on mobility, moving when animals shifted, plants changed, water dried, or the weather made one place less safe. You sit beside the fire, and the ground feels uneven beneath you. Someone has chosen this place with care. It is not too exposed to the wind. It is not too far from water. It gives a view into the surrounding darkness, but also has enough cover to soften the cold. The people here may not speak of camp planning in the modern sense, but they understand it deeply. They know the land in a way that no map app could ever truly explain. Above you, the stars shine with almost impossible brightness, without smoke from cities, electric lights, or buildings blocking the horizon. The night sky becomes enormous. It feels less like a ceiling and more like a living ocean turned upside down. You can see pale bands of stars stretching overhead. You might wonder how often people looked up and told stories about those lights. Did they see animals, ancestors, paths, warnings, or seasons? Researchers continue to ask how far back human sky traditions might reach, because spoken stories vanish easily. While stone tools and bones are a little more stubborn about staying behind, a child wakes briefly near the centre of the camp. They make a small sound, not quite crying, not quite speaking. An adult nearby touches their shoulder, murmurs something soft, and the child settles again. No one seems annoyed. Sleep here is shared, warmth is shared, noise is shared. Privacy, as a modern idea, has not exactly arrived yet. And frankly, in this cold, privacy might be less useful than another warm body nearby. The firelight moves across faces. You notice age in the group. There are children, strong adults, and a few older people whose movements are slower but whose attention seems sharp. In a harsh world, old age is not common in the way it is today, but the presence of older adults matters. They carry memory. They may remember a drought from years earlier, a distant grove of useful trees, a dangerous crossing, a season when animals came later than expected. In a world without notebooks, memory can become a kind of technology. A lesser-known tidbit from studies of hunter-gatherer societies is that grandparents and older relatives may have played an important role in human survival by helping with childcare, food knowledge, and teaching. It is not as glamorous as bringing down a giant animal, of course, but anyone who has ever looked after a toddler knows that preventing tiny disasters all day is its own heroic profession. The camp smells of smoke, earth, and hide. Some hides have been softened through scraping and working. Others are stiffer, used as ground coverings or wind protection. You can feel one beside your hand, rough in some places, smoother in others, carrying faint traces of animal scent and smoke. Smoke is everywhere here. It gets into hair, clothing, bedding, tools. It can sting the eyes, but it also helps preserve, repel insects, and mark human presence. The smell is strong, but after a while, it becomes part of the night. Someone near the edge of the fire makes a quiet clicking sound with their tongue, then gestures toward the dark. Another person rises slowly, not alarmed, only attentive. They walk a few steps beyond the main circle, pause, listen, and return. Perhaps they heard an animal, perhaps only wind moved through brush. Either way, the group responds without panic. This is the rhythm of ancient sleep. Rest does not mean forgetting the world. It means trusting others to listen while you drift. You notice how people arrange themselves. Children and vulnerable sleepers stay closer to the warmth. Tools remain near adults. The fire sits not only as comfort, but as boundary. It draws people inward. It gives the group a centre that the night cannot easily erase. Scholars remain divided on how much early human camps followed fixed social patterns. Some suggest that repeated arrangements of hearths, sleeping areas, and tool-making spaces may reflect structured habits. Others warn that archaeological traces are often too incomplete to read with confidence. After 70,000 years, a camp can become a scatter of stones, ash, and bone fragments. An archaeologist must try to hear a whisper through a wall of time. Still, as you sit here, the human logic feels clear. Keep the fire tended, keep children warm, keep tools close, keep the group near enough to hear one another breathe. A small gust of wind moves through camp. The fire leans sideways, then straightens. Cold brushes the back of your neck. You pull your covering closer. The hide is heavy, not soft like modern blankets, but it holds warmth. It smells of smoke and animal fat. It scratches lightly against your skin. This is comfort in its older form, not polished, not clean in the modern laundry detergent sense, but deeply useful. Beyond the camp, the land is waiting. There may be dry grassland, scattered trees, rocky slopes, river banks, or open plains depending on where this group has travelled. 70,000 years ago, climates varied across the world, and humans had to adapt to many environments. Some lived near coasts, some moved through inland valleys, some stayed close to lakes or seasonal rivers. The important thing is that no single landscape explains them all. Human survival came from flexibility. You hear a soft laugh from two adults near the fire. It is barely louder than the crackle of wood. Maybe someone made a small joke. Maybe someone teased another person for nearly falling asleep sitting up. Even in a harsh world, people are still people. They do not spend every moment solemnly demonstrating survival strategies for future documentaries. They joke, sigh, complain, share, remember, and probably get irritated when someone takes the warmest spot too often. That thought makes the camp feel closer, not less ancient but more human. The night continues slowly. The stars wheel overhead, though too gradually for you to see the motion. The fire settles into red coals. The camp breathes in layers, sleeping children, watchful adults, older faces half lit, tools resting in shadows, hides shifting in the wind. You understand now that shelter is not only a structure, shelter is arrangement. It is knowledge. It is where the fire is placed, who sleeps beside whom, which direction the wind comes from, and who wakes when the darkness makes a sound. It is the quiet agreement that no one survives alone for long. And under the ancient star, in this small camp beneath the open sky, that agreement holds. The fire has become the quiet heart of everything. You notice this before you understand it fully. People do not simply sit near the flames because they are cold, though the cold is certainly persuasive. They sit near it because the fire gathers the camp into one shared space. It draws faces from darkness, turns hands golden, softens fear, and gives the night a shape that humans can bear. Before firelight, the world beyond the body is mostly sound. A twig breaking, a breath of wind, a distant animal moving through grass. But inside the glow, the world becomes visible again. You can see the curve of a sleeping child's cheek, the pale edge of a stone flake, the smoke climbing upward in a wavering column. You can see someone's expression change. You can see whether a tool edge is sharp, whether meat has cooked enough, whether an ember is still alive beneath ash. A mainstream historical fact is that controlled fire was one of the most important technologies in human evolution, used for warmth, cooking, protection, light, and social gathering long before the rise of farming or cities. By 70,000 years ago, humans were not just encountering fire by accident. They were using it as part of daily survival, carrying knowledge of how to feed it, preserve it, and place it carefully within camp life. You sit close enough to feel heat on your palms. The warmth is uneven. One side of your body relaxes while the other stays alert to the cold. Your skin prickles, smoke drifts toward you, and you shift a little. Because even 70,000 years ago, smoke had the special talent of following the person who least wanted it. Some ancient problems are very democratic that way. Someone leans forward and nudges a blackened stick deeper into the coals. The wood collapses slightly, sending up a spray of tiny sparks. The sparks rise for a breath, bright and weightless, then disappear into the dark. The smell changes as fresh bark begins to burn, sharper now, with a resinous scent that reminds you of pine, dry branches, and weathered trees. The group watches the fire without staring too obviously. It gives people something gentle to look at while they talk. A face can turn toward the flame instead of directly toward another person. A memory can be spoken slowly. A warning can be shared. A child can be corrected without harshness. In this way, fire becomes more than heat. It becomes a stage for social life. Though, thankfully, without anyone demanding applause, researchers still debate when and where humans first mastered fire in a consistent way. Some archaeological sites suggest very ancient controlled use, while others as difficult to interpret because natural fires can leave confusing traces. Scholars remain cautious because ash, charcoal, and burned bone must be studied carefully before anyone can say with confidence that people made and controlled the flames. Yet by the time you are sitting in this camp, fire is clearly woven into human life. You watch one of the older adults lift a small ember with a piece of bark and place it carefully near dry material. They do not need a roaring blaze. A small ember is precious. It holds tomorrow's warmth inside today's ash. If the group moves in the morning, carrying live coals may save time and effort. Starting fire from nothing can be difficult, depending on tools, weather, and available materials. Preserving an ember is a quiet form of wisdom, the kind that rarely sounds impressive until you're cold, damp, and very much regretting your lack of planning. A lesser-known tidbit is that many traditional societies use containers of bark, fungus, dried plant fibre, or ash to transport embers safely from one camp to another. The exact methods varied, but the idea is beautifully practical. Do not let the fire become only a place. Let it become something that travels with you. You look at the hands around the flames, hands with cracked skin, hands darkened by smoke, hands holding tools, hides, bones, roots, and sleeping children. These hands are not separate from the fire, they know its moods. Too much fuel and the flames waste wood, too little, and the coals fade. Green wood smokes heavily, dry twigs catch quickly but vanish fast. Thick branches last longer but need patience. Every fire is a small negotiation, and the people around you have been negotiating with flame their whole lives. Near the edge of the fire, someone places a piece of food on a flat stone warmed by coals. The scent rises slowly. Cooking changes the night. It makes food softer, safer, easier to chew, and richer in smell. The warm scent moves through camp, and even those half asleep seem to notice. A child opens their eyes, blinks, and then decides sleep is still the better option. A wise choice. Honestly, fire also changes the body's relationship with time. Without it, darkness would end many activities. With it, people can repair tools, scrape hides, prepare food, tell stories, and watch over each other after sunset. The day stretches a little deeper into night, not in the modern way, where artificial light can trick you into answering messages at midnight. A terrible invention disguised as convenience. This is softer. Firelight allows work, but it also encourages rest. The flames make the world smaller. You can hear voices more clearly inside the circle. Someone speaks in a low tone, perhaps describing a path taken earlier in the day. Another person answers with a short sound, A third gestures with a hand, drawing a shape in the air. The fire catches the movement and turns it briefly into shadow on a nearby hide. For a moment, a hand becomes a bird, or a branch, or some creature that exists only in flicker. You begin to understand why fire and storytelling belong together. A story told in daylight is useful. A story told by firelight becomes something else. The darkness around the camp makes the spoken world feel larger. A tale of an animal trail, a dangerous river crossing, a remembered storm, or a strange sign in the sky can settle deeply into everyone listening. Children learn without feeling taught. Adults remember without needing marks on bark or stone. The flames do not record the story, but they help the mind hold it. The smoke rises and thins. Your eyes water slightly. You blink, and the stars blur for a moment. When your vision clears, you see the older woman from earlier watching the embers with an expression that is difficult to read. Perhaps she's tired. Perhaps she's remembering other fires, other camps, other people who once sat in light like this. The past is not written here, but it is carried in faces. A branch pops. No one startles. The sound is familiar. The fire shifts, breathes, settles again. Beyond the glow, the night remains wild. Predators may move under the trees. Cold may gather in low ground. The path to water may be hidden in shadow. But the fire gives the group a claim, not ownership exactly, but presence. It says that humans are here, small, vulnerable, clever, social, stubborn humans are here. You hold your hands closer to the flames. For a moment, the warmth reaches the bones of your fingers. It is not a grand feeling. It is better than grand. It is simple and complete. And in this ancient night, where survival depends on attention, memory, cooperation, and small acts repeated well, the fire keeps burning. Not loudly, not forever, just enough. By the time the fire settles into a bed of glowing coals, the wind has begun to change. You notice it first against your cheek. Not a strong wind, nothing dramatic, just a colder current slipping quietly through the grass and low trees beyond the camp. The people around you seem to notice it almost immediately. One adult adjusts a hide covering near the children. Another shifts position so smoke continues drifting away from the sleeping area. Nobody announces the weather with grand importance, but everyone pays attention to it. In this world, weather is never background scenery. It shapes movement, hunger, sleep, safety, and survival itself. You pull your covering tighter around your shoulders and look toward the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond the firelight, the land stretches outward across valleys, open plains, scattered forests, rocky ridges, and rivers moving through the night 70,000 years ago. Earth was colder and less stable in many regions than the comfortable climate humans later grew used to during agricultural times. Ice sheets covered enormous areas farther north, while shifting rainfall patterns could change landscapes over generations. Long before cities or kingdoms existed, humans were already adapting to difficult climates with remarkable flexibility. They survived not because the environment was gentle, but because they learned how to respond to change faster than many other creatures could. The cold tonight is dry. You feel it settling into the ground beneath you. It moves through the soles of your feet and into your legs whenever you stay still too long. The fire helps, but only partly. Ancient cold is persistent. It does not politely remain outdoors where it belongs. It follows seams in clothing, creeps through gaps in shelter, and waits patiently for the fire to weaken. One small detail many people never think about is how much prehistoric survival depended on avoiding energy loss. Staying warm required food, movement, shelter, and cooperation. A body that became too cold needed more calories to recover. A person weakened by hunger had less ability to stay warm. Everything connected to everything else. You glance around the camp again. No one here owns thick woven blankets or insulated boots. There are no heated buildings waiting nearby. The people survive through layers of hide, careful positioning near the fire, shared warmth, and accumulated experience. Their knowledge is practical and immediate. Which valleys flood after heavy rain, which caves trap cold air, which trees provide better fuel, which animal skins hold warmth best during damp weather. A young man near the edge of camp rises quietly and walks a short distance into the darkness. You hear dry grass brushing against his legs. A moment later, he returns carrying several branches tucked beneath one arm. The branches are not large, but they are dry, and dry wood matters. Fresh wood smokes heavily. Wet wood hisses and wastes heat. Good firewood can feel almost luxurious in a cold landscape. Archaeological discoveries from ancient campsites suggest that early humans became highly skilled at reading environmental patterns. Burned wood remains, seasonal animal bones, and plant traces hint that people understood local climates in sophisticated ways, even without written science. Survival depended less on brute strength than on observation repeated across generations. The wind shifts again. This time it carries another scent. Distant rain. Not close enough to hear yet, but present somewhere beyond the hills. The adults nearest the fire exchange brief glances. One points toward the horizon. Another nods slightly. You realize that weather here is interpreted almost like conversation. Smells, clouds, air pressure, wind direction, and animal behavior all speak in small signals. Today people open weather apps while standing indoors beside central heating and still somehow complain the forecast betrayed them. Here, the forecast lives in the air itself. A child wakes and coughs softly from the smoke. Immediately, someone adjusts their sleeping place farther from the thickest smoke drift. Care moves quickly through the group without needing long discussion. The children are watched constantly, though not in the modern, hovering parent style where someone narrates every bite of food like a nature documentary. Here, attention is quieter, more practical. You study the hides wrapped around the sleepers. Some are patched carefully with sinew stitching. Others carry scars from older use. Nothing is wasted easily. A damaged hide can still block wind. A broken tool may still provide smaller cutting flakes. Survival leaves little room for carelessness. Evidence uncovered from prehistoric sites indicates that humans at this time were already capable of planning ahead for difficult seasons. Storage was limited compared to later farming societies, but groups likely anticipated migrations, weather shifts, and changing food availability. The ability to think beyond the immediate moment may have been one of humanity's greatest advantages. The fire crackles sharply. For a brief moment, sparks rush upward into the dark air like tiny orange insects. Your eyes follow them instinctively before they vanish into the black sky. Above you, clouds have begun to gather slowly across part of the starscape. The change is subtle, a thinning here, a blur there. The stars closest to the horizon disappear first. The people notice. One woman begins tightening part of the shelter covering with practiced hands. Another checks a bundle of gathered materials resting near the fire. Nobody behaves fearfully. Rain is not unusual. Cold is not unusual. Wind is not unusual. The danger comes from failing to prepare before conditions worsen. Some anthropologists believe this constant environmental pressure helped shape human cooperation itself. Groups that shared labour, information, and protection may have survived difficult climates more successfully than isolated individuals. Others caution that prehistoric social behaviour is difficult to reconstruct fully from limited evidence. Bones and tools survive. Conversations do not. Still, as you watch the camp responding together to changing weather, the importance of cooperation feels obvious. One person gathers fuel, another secures shelter, another watches children, another studies the horizon. Survival spreads across many hands. The temperature continues dropping. You can feel moisture beginning to gather in the air now. The earth smells richer, darker, Somewhere nearby, insect quiet down. Even the night sounds shift with the weather. It reminds you that ancient people did not experience nature as scenery. They lived inside it completely. You lower yourself closer to the fire. Heat brushes your face again while your back remains cool. Your hands stretch toward the warmth automatically, across from you. An older man rubs his palms slowly together, staring into the coals with half-tired eyes. Firelight flickers across the deep lines of his face. You wonder how many winters he has seen, how many storms, how many camps long vanished into dust and grass. The first faint drop of rain touches the ground nearby. Then another. Soft, unhurried, several people move calmly beneath the shelter coverings. Children are lifted without fully waking. Tools are shifted away from exposed ground. The fire is partially protected using stone and hide positioning that clearly comes from long experience. No one speaks loudly. No one panics. You realize this may be one of the most important survival skills of all. Calmness. Not ignorance of danger, not lack of fear, just the ability to respond steadily while the world changes around you. The rain strengthens slightly, tapping against stretched hides and dark soil. Smoke curls lower now beneath the damp air. The camp tightens inward around the protected fire, around shared warmth, around practiced routines older than memory. And beneath the moving clouds of this ancient world, humanity endures another cold night not through domination, but through patience, awareness, and each quiet act done at the right time. By morning, the rain has passed into a grey silence. The camp is damp but not defeated. Drops cling to the edges of hide coverings. Ash near the hearth has darkened at the edges, while the protected centre still holds a low red glow. Someone has already leaned close to coax the embers back into flame, feeding them dry fibres saved carefully through the night. A thin thread of smoke rises, hesitant at first, then steadier. You wake to the smell of wet earth and old smoke. The air feels cold against your face. Your covering is stiff in places where moisture settled. Around you, the group begins moving slowly, not with the cheerful bounce of people who slept wonderfully. Because let us be honest, prehistoric camping did not include memory foams, but they move with purpose. A morning like this asks for repair, preparation, and patience. Near the fire, a person sits with a stone core resting in their hand. At first glance, it looks like nothing special. Just a lump of dark stone, smooth in some places, rough in others, but the person holding it sees possibilities inside it. Their thumb moves along the surface, feeling angles. Their eyes search for the right place to strike. They are not guessing. They are reading the stone. Long before metal tools, humans shaped stone into blades, scrapers, points, and flakes used for cutting meat, scraping hides, working wood, and preparing plant materials. By 70,000 years ago, many human groups were already capable of producing carefully planned stone tools, often choosing particular raw materials because they fractured in useful ways. This was not crude smashing. It was skill, memory, and hand-eye precision passed from person to person. You sit nearby and watch. The toolmaker lifts a hammerstone and taps the core. The sound is small but clear. Click! A thin flake breaks away and lands near their knee. It catches the morning light along one edge, sharp and delicate as glass. The person picks it up, turns it, studies it, and sets it beside other useful pieces. Some flakes will become cutting tools. Some will be retouched along the edge. Others may be discarded if they're too thick, too short, or broken in the wrong way. It is almost peaceful to watch. Strike. Pause. Turn the stone. Listen. Feel. Strike again. Every movement seems calm, but the calm hides years of learning. A badly placed blow can ruin the core. A good strike can produce an edge sharp enough to open hide, slice sinew, or carve wood. The toolmaker's hands understand force, angle, texture, and patience. In a modern workshop, someone might call this craftsmanship. Here, it is also breakfast, clothing, shelter, and survival. One overlooked detail of stone toolmaking is how noisy it can be. A camp where several people are knapping stone may produce a steady rhythm of clicks and cracks, almost like a strange prehistoric percussion section. Not music exactly, unless you're very generous, but still part of the soundscape of daily life. A child creeps closer, watching with wide eyes. No one pushes them away. The adult slows slightly, letting the child see the angle of the blow. The child reaches for a broken flake, and another adult gently moves their hand away from the sharp edge. A quiet lesson happens without a speech. This is how knowledge travels here. Through watching, through warning, through imitation, through small corrections made before fingers bleed. Archaeologists have found that some ancient toolmaking traditions required complex sequences of preparation before a useful flake could be removed. This has led many researchers to explore how early humans planned several steps ahead, imagining a future shape hidden inside the stone. Others remain cautious, since tools alone cannot reveal the full thoughts of the people who made them. Still, the objects left behind show more than simple reaction. They show intention. You pick up a finished scraper handed to you. It sits neatly in your palm. One edge has been worked so it curves slightly. The surface feels cool, heavier than it looks. When you brush it gently against a scrap of hide, it catches. You understand at once why such a tool matters. Hide does not become clothing by wishing. It must be cleaned, scraped, softened, stretched, smoked, cut and stitched. A stone edge can turn an animal's skin into shelter, bedding, clothing, carrying bags, or bindings. The tool is small, its consequences are large. Nearby, another person works on a wooden shaft. They use a sharp flake to smooth a narrow branch, shaving off curls of damp wood. The smell is fresh, green, and clean beneath the camp smoke. Their movements are slow, almost meditative. A tool does not stand alone. A stone point may need a wooden handle, a scraper may be wrapped for grip, a cutting flake may be used briefly, then replaced. Technology here is not one object. It is a web of materials. Stone, wood, bone, sinew, hide, resina, fibre, fire, hands. You begin to see the camp as a place of making, not just resting, not just surviving the night. Every morning repairs the world a little. A broken binding is tightened, a dull edge is replaced, a hide covering is checked, a carrying strap is twisted again. Tools are not separate from life here. They are part of the daily rhythm, like breathing and listening. What surprises many modern readers is that prehistoric people often carried selected stone over long distances, or returned repeatedly to places where good material could be found. Useful stone was not everywhere. Some rock shattered poorly, some was too soft, some was hard to shape. Good raw material could become valuable enough to plan around, trade, or remember across seasons. You look toward the wet landscape beyond camp. Somewhere out there may be a riverbank with rounded stones, a cliff with sharp flint, a dry wash holding nodules, or a distant outcrop known to the older members of the group. The land is not just scenery. It is a supply room without shelves, labels, or customer service. To use it well, you must know where things belong. A woman near the fire tests a blade against a strip of sinew. She nods once, good enough. That little nod carries relief. A sharp edge means less wasted effort. Less wasted effort means saved energy. Saved energy means better odds when cold returns, when food is scarce, when a child needs carrying, when the group must move. You remember the fire from the night before, and the way it gathered everyone inward. Now, in daylight, stone tools do something similar. They gather memory into form. Each flake holds a choice. each edge holds experience. Each finished tool is a quiet answer to the question this world keeps asking. How will you live here? The answer is not loud. It is a hand choosing the right stone. Careful strike, a child watching, a sharp edge catching morning light. And around you, beneath a pale sky still heavy with the last of the rain, the camp slowly prepares itself for another day in the ancient world. The morning grows brighter slowly, though the sun itself still hides behind layers of pale cloud. Moisture clings to the grass around camp. Every step presses dark footprints into the damp ground. The air smells cleaner after the rain, washed of dust and smoke for a little while. Nearby branches drip softly, and somewhere beyond the trees, water moves with a steady rushing sound. The group is preparing to travel, not far, perhaps only toward a river crossing or an area where animals were seen recently. But movement shapes life here. People do not remain still unless conditions allow it. Food shifts, water changes, seasons move, human beings follow. You rise with the others and feel stiffness in your legs from the cold night. Nearby, someone checks the bindings on a spear shaft while another tightens a carrying strap made from twisted hide. A child rubs sleep from their eyes and reaches automatically for an older hand. No one rushes, yet nothing feels lazy. The camp moves with practiced efficiency, as though each person already knows their place inside the morning. Soon you leave the shelter area behind. The fire remains low and protected, with signs carefully reduced. Ash is spread. Useful materials are packed. Little is abandoned casually. Ancient campsites may look temporary, but they represent labour, fuel, planning, and memory. Even departure requires thought. You follow a narrow path through damp grass. At first, the landscape seems empty. Just open ground, scattered shrubs, shallow puddles, distant trees. But gradually, as the group slows and begins paying attention to the earth itself, you realize the land is full of information. One of the hunters kneels near soft mud. You crouch beside him. At first you see almost nothing. Then slowly, shapes appear. A split hoof pressed into wet soil. Another print slightly deeper. Broken grass bent toward the east. Tiny droplets still gathered along the edges of the track. Fresh. Very fresh. Long before written maps existed. Humans already relied on tracking to understand the movement of animals and people. Evidence from both archaeology and surviving tracking traditions suggests that skilled hunters could read astonishing detail from footprints, disturbed vegetation, and subtle changes in the ground. Tracking was not magic. It was observation sharpened through years of attention. The hunter touches the edge of the print carefully. He studies the depth, the angle, the spacing. You notice everyone nearby becoming quieter. Tracking changes the mood of the group. Voices lower, movement slows. Even children seem to understand instinctively that attention matters now. One fascinating detail about tracking is that experienced trackers can sometimes estimate not only what animal passed through, but how quickly it moved, whether it was injured, whether it carried weight, and how long ago it crossed the area. Modern people occasionally struggle to find their parked car in a shopping centre, so this level of awareness feels almost supernatural by comparison. The group moves again. This time the pace is different. People spread slightly apart while remaining close enough to signal one another. Eyes move constantly between the ground and the landscape ahead. You begin noticing details too. Broken reeds near water. Mud disturbed beside stones, a feather caught low in brush. The world transforms once you understand that every surface carries traces of movement. The land itself becomes a kind of memory. A narrow trail leads toward a softer ground near the riverbank. The sound of flowing water grows louder now. Cold air drifts upward from the river, carrying the scent of wet stone and clay. Birds move overhead in sudden bursts, then settle again farther downstream. One of the younger adults pauses and points silently. Across the muddy bank are more tracks. Several this time, larger. The group studies them carefully. Some researchers believe early humans developed unusually advanced visual attention compared to many other animals, partly because survival rewarded pattern recognition so strongly. Others suggest that modern humans still possess these abilities, but rarely use them fully in daily life. After all, most people today are not required to identify breakfast by examining dirt. You step carefully beside the others. The mud feels cold beneath your feet. Small insects hover above the shallows. River grass brushes against your legs. The tracks ahead belong to large grazing animals, perhaps moving toward open feeding grounds after the rain. The hunters exchange brief gestures. Nothing theatrical, no heroic speeches, just quiet decisions, direction, distance, possibility. You notice how little wasted movement there is. People conserve energy naturally because energy matters. A long chase under poor conditions could exhaust the group for little reward. Ancient hunting often depended more on patience, coordination, and environmental understanding than raw speed alone. A child nearby whispers a question to an older woman. The woman answers softly while tracing a shape in the air with one finger, perhaps explaining the animal's movement. Teaching continues constantly here, not through classrooms or formal lessons, but through participation. Children learn by staying close enough to observe real decisions unfolding in real time. Archaeological findings hint that humans 70,000 years ago already possess strong social learning abilities. Knowledge could spread through imitation, shared practice, gesture, speech, and repeated observation. This may have allowed survival techniques to pass efficiently across generations, even without writing systems. The group follows the trail away from the river now. The ground rises slightly beneath your feet. Wet earth gives way to firmer soil scattered with stone and dry brush. The tracks become harder to see here, but not invisible. A bent stem, a displaced pebble, a faint depression near roots. The hunters continue reading signs you barely notice. You realize tracking requires imagination as much as eyesight. A person must mentally reconstruct movement from fragments. The animal stepped here, paused there, turned slightly, moved uphill, perhaps startled, perhaps calm. The tracker sees both the visible mark and the invisible action behind it. Clouds shift overhead. For a brief moment, sunlight reaches the landscape, turning droplets along the grass into pale silver light. Steam rises faintly from damp ground warming beneath the sun. The air smells richer now, alive with wet soil and crushed leaves. One of the adults pauses suddenly and raises a hand. Everyone stops. Silence settles at once. You hear only wind moving through distant grass. Then, faintly, somewhere ahead, comes the sound of movement. Not loud, just enough. Several animals crossing brush. The group lowers slightly, using terrain and shrubs for cover. No excitement spreads through the camp members. No dramatic charging forward. Ancient hunting often demanded restraint more than aggression. You feel your own breathing slow. The people around you seem deeply connected to the land at this moment. Not separate observers standing outside nature, but participants moving carefully within it. Every sound matters. Every scent matters. Every footprint becomes part of a larger conversation between humans and the world sustaining them. And as you crouch quietly beneath the pale morning sky, following tracks older than recorded history, you begin understanding how survival here depends not on conquering the land, but on learning how to read it with patience, humility, and extraordinary care. The animals remain somewhere ahead, hidden by brush and distance, but the group does not rush toward them. Instead, the movement slows again. You see now that survival is not only about the hunt. That idea belongs more to modern imagination than to the full reality of ancient life. People remember spears because spears look dramatic in museum displays. But a day in this world is also filled with quieter work searching for roots, noticing seeds, testing fibers, gathering bark, choosing wood, carrying water, and watching plants with the same attention given to animal tracks. The group spreads gently across the damp ground. Some adults continue watching the direction of the animals, while others turn toward the edges of the riverbank, where edible plants may be easier to find after rain. The soil is soft here. Low green shoots push through mud, small leaves glisten with moisture. A woman bends near a cluster of plants and begins loosening the earth with a digging stick. The stick is worn smooth from use, darkened by handling, and shaped with the same care you noticed earlier in stone tools. Across prehistoric landscapes, gathered foods formed a major part of human diets. Meat mattered, especially when large animals could be successfully hunted or scavenged. But plants, nuts, seeds, roots, berries, shellfish, insects, eggs, and small animals could provide steady nourishment. Depending on place and season, gathering may have supplied much of the daily food that kept people moving. You crouch beside the woman and watch her work. She does not tear blindly at the ground. She knows where to press. She loosens soil around the root, lifts carefully, shakes off mud, and checks the size. Some roots are kept, others are left. Nothing about this seems random. It is a kind of reading. Just like tracking, the land speaks through leaves, stems, textures, smells, and timing. She hands you a small root. It is cool and damp in your palm. The skin is rough, with fine thread still clinging to it. You smell earth, bitterness, and something faintly sweet. In a modern kitchen, you might wash it under running water, peel it neatly, perhaps complain that it is not organic enough despite growing in actual soil. Here, the root is possibility, food, energy, a small answer to hunger. Nearby, an older woman shows a child how to separate useful stems from useless ones. The child watches closely, then tries to copy the motion. The first attempt breaks the stem too short. The older woman makes a soft sound, not scolding, and demonstrates again. This is school in the older human sense. No desks, no bells, no homework left mysteriously untouched until bedtime. Just hands, plants, patience, and repetition. One easily overlooked part of daily life involved plant knowledge so detailed that a careless person could become very hungry, or worse, very ill. Some plants fed the body, some soothed pain, some helped bind wounds, some made fibres, some burned well, some looked useful but were best left alone. The difference was learned over many generations, and that learning may have been as valuable as any stone blade. You move farther along the river's edge. The air smells of wet leaves and clay. Insects flicker over the water. A bird calls from a branch, then goes silent. The sound of the group gathering is gentle digging sticks pressing into soil, leaves being stripped, quiet voices, a child laughing once before being hushed with a smile. A man cuts thin, flexible branches from a shrub and tests them by bending. One snaps too easily, and he drops it. Another bends without breaking. He keeps that one. You realize he is not gathering food at all. He is gathering future tools. Flexible wood can become frames, traps, baskets, bindings, or parts of shelter. The landscape is not divided into neat categories like food aisle, hardware aisle, and medicine cabinet. Everything is mixed together, and human knowledge sorts it. Some specialists interpret traces of plant starch on ancient stone tools as evidence that early humans processed roots, tubers, or seeds long before farming. Others are careful with such conclusions, since microscopic residues can be difficult to analyze and preserve unevenly. Still, the surviving clues point toward a rich plant-based knowledge that rarely survives as clearly as stone and bone. A little farther on, several people stop near a patch of low bushes. The berries are small and dark. No one eats immediately. An older adult studies the leaves first, then the stems, then the fruit. She tastes one cautiously, waits, and gestures that some may be collected. The children are allowed to help, but their hands are watched. Gathering is not simply picking everything that looks colourful, which is also good advice for modern buffets. Honestly, the berries stain fingers. Their smell is tart and fresh. They are placed into a flexible container made from plant fibre and hide. The container is not perfectly shaped, but it works. A few berries roll free, and a child quickly gathers them before they sink into the mud. Nothing is wasted lightly. You notice how gathering changes the mood of the morning. The hunt ahead is uncertain. The animals may vanish, the wind may shift, a spear may miss, but these roots, berries, stems, and fibres are here now, gathered slowly into the day's security. There is comfort in small, reliable gains. Not every meal depends on one dramatic moment. Environmental evidence from ancient landscapes suggests that humans lived through periods of changing vegetation, shifting rainfall, and unpredictable resources. Flexibility was essential. A group that knew many food sources had better chances than one dependent on a single resource. Survival came from variety, from remembering many options when the world refused to be simple. You walk with the group toward a stand of trees. The ground is drier here, covered in leaf litter softened by last night's rain. The smell is rich and slightly sweet, with hints of decay, bark, and fungus. One person kneels near a fallen log and removes a dry inner piece sheltered from moisture. Another collects bark in strips. Someone else gathers a lump of fungus from dead wood, handling it carefully. A detail often missed in stories of ancient survival is how useful fungus could be. Certain kinds could help carry embers, start fires, or serve other practical purposes. Not every fungus was useful, of course, and some were dangerous, because nature enjoys making things complicated. The older man from the night before examines the gathered materials and nods. You feel the day accumulating in small pieces. Roots in a hide pouch, berries in a woven container, flexible branches over one shoulder, dry wood tucked beneath an arm, bark strips bundled with cord. Each item seems humble alone. Together, they become survival. As the group prepares to move again, you glance back toward the river. The morning light has strengthened. Mist lifts from the water in thin, pale ribbons. The tracks of animals remain in the mud nearby, reminding you that the hunt may still happen. But now you understand something important. Humans did not survive only by chasing what ran away. They survived by noticing what stayed still. Roots beneath the soil, seeds in dry grass, fibres in stems, dry wood under wet bark, medicine in leaves, fuel inside fungus. And in this patient gathering, in the quiet bending of backs and the careful work of hands, you see another side of endurance, not heroic, not loud, but steady enough to carry people through another day. The morning's gathering slowly becomes a lesson without anyone calling it one. You notice it in the way the children move among the adults. They are not separated from the work of survival. They are inside it, near enough to watch, copy, misunderstand, try again, and slowly become useful. The small child carries a few flexible stems with great seriousness, as if entrusted with the fate of the entire group. Another follows close behind an older woman, stepping where she steps, looking where she looks. The group does not pause life in order to teach. Life itself teaches. You walk beside them as the land rises gently away from the river. The soil becomes firmer underfoot. Wet grass brushes against your legs. The sun has broken through the clouds in pale patches, lighting the world unevenly. Here a golden slope. There a shadowed stand of trees. Drops still fall from branches, tapping leaves below in soft, irregular rhythms. In a world without schools, books, writing, or screens. Knowledge passes through bodies and voices. Children learn which plants to avoid, how to read animal tracks, how to sit near smoke without choking, how to carry embers, how to shape stone, and when to stay quiet. They learn by being close. This kind of learning is slow, repetitive, and deeply social. You see an older man kneel beside a patch of mud and call a child closer with a small gesture. He points to a mark in the ground. The child looks, frowns, then points in the wrong direction. The older man shakes his head gently and traces the path again, showing where the hoof entered soft earth and where it lifted. The child leans closer. No lecture, no scolding, just patience. The surviving evidence from ancient human life suggests that cooperation across ages was essential. Children took years to grow into skilled adults, and during that long time they needed food, protection, and instruction. Human childhood is unusually long compared with many animals, which sounds inefficient until you remember what it allows: learning, imagination, social bonds, and the slow building of complex skills. A smaller child nearby picks up a stone flake and holds it proudly. An adult notices instantly. The flake is removed from the child's hand before harm is done, and a duller piece is given instead. The child accepts the replacement with mild disappointment. The ancient version of being handed a toy phone when the real one looked far more interesting. Some human experiences seem timeless. You continue walking. The older woman from the river carries roots in a hide pouch. A girl, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, walks beside her, watching how the pouch is tied and balanced so it does not swing too much. After a while, the woman unties the pouch and lets the girl try. The knot comes loose almost immediately. A few roots tumble to the ground. The girl freezes, embarrassed. No one laughs harshly. The roots are gathered again. The knot is shown again. The girl tries again. One easily forgotten detail about prehistoric life is how much childhood must have involved practice with real materials. A child could learn with small tools: broken fibres, scraps of hide, dull stones, bits of wood, and old containers. Play and training may not have been sharply separated. A pretend task today could become a necessary skill tomorrow. The group pauses in a sheltered clearing. Here, branches bend overhead, and the ground is dry enough for a short rest. Several adults sit, children cluster nearby, though not in one neat group. Some lie on their stomachs and draw lines in the soil. One uses a twig to copy the shape of an animal track seen earlier. Another presses their hand into damp clay and laughs quietly at the print left behind. You look at the handprint. Small fingers. A palm, a mark that will soon vanish. Rain may erase it, feet may disturb it, sun may crack it. Yet for a moment it is there, a brief sign of a young human learning the power of marks. You think of much later handprints on cave walls, of pigments blown around fingers, of human presence preserved in darkness. Not this mark, perhaps, but the impulse feels close. There is still quiet disagreement among researchers about how early symbolic behaviour developed and how children participated in it. Some suggest that play, imitation, body decoration, and marking surfaces may have helped shape human imagination. Others point out that the evidence from such deep time is fragmentary, and soft materials rarely survive. Still, wherever children exist, curiosity follows. Near the edge of the clearing, a boy tries to imitate the stone toolmaker's motion using two harmless rocks. Click, nothing happens. Click, still nothing. He adjusts his angle, concentrating so hard his mouth opens slightly. An adult watches from nearby, amused but patient. Eventually, the adult reaches over, turns the stone in the boy's hand and taps once. A tiny chip breaks away. The boy's eyes widen. It is a small moment, but it feels enormous. Skill has crossed from one mind to another. Not fully, not perfectly, but the bridge has begun. You notice older adults especially. They do not always move fastest. They may not carry the heaviest loads, but their presence changes the camp's intelligence. They remember where water lasted during a dry season. They remember which child has already been warned about a poisonous berry, probably more than once. They remember stories, routes, quarrels, births, losses, jokes, and dangers. Anthropologists have long considered the possibility that elder knowledge gave human groups a powerful advantage. In harsh environments, memory could mean survival. A young hunter might see only today's tracks. An older person might remember that after rains like this, animals often move toward a certain ridge by late afternoon. That kind of knowledge does not shout. It simply saves energy. The children settle around the older woman as she begins sorting gathered plants. She separates roots into small piles, some for eating soon, some that need cooking, some not worth carrying farther. She lets the children smell them, touch them, compare them. One root is split open to show its pale inside. Another is discarded because it has spoiled. The lesson is sensory, practical, unforgettable. Smell this. Feel that? Do not eat this one. Wait for this one to cook. You realize that memory here is not abstract. It lives in hands, noses, tongues, scars, and habits. Knowledge is tasted, carried, repeated, sometimes learned the hard way, though everyone clearly prefers the easier way when available. A breeze moves through the clearing, leaves tremble overhead, sunlight flickers over faces, a child grows sleepy and leans against an adult's side, another still plays with a twig, drawing tracks that slowly become spirals, then nothing in particular. The group rests in that soft pause between work and movement. You feel how tender this system is. Children are vulnerable, yes. They consume food before they can reliably provide it. They slow travel. They cry at inconvenient times, which, to be fair, children have maintained as a tradition across all eras. But they are also the future of every remembered path, every tool technique, every plant name, every warning call, every story told beside fire. Without them, survival has no tomorrow. Without the old survival forgets yesterday. And here, in this damp clearing 70,000 years ago, you sit between those two quiet necessities as knowledge passes gently from hand to hand, voice to voice, breath to breath. By late afternoon, the air begins cooling again. The warmth left behind by the pale sun fades quickly across the open land. Shadows stretch longer beneath trees and stones. A breeze slips through the clearing where the group has rested, carrying the smell of damp earth, smoke from distant embers, and the faint animal scent lingering on hides and clothing. You notice everyone preparing for night before night actually arrives. That alone tells you something important about this world. Warmth cannot be improvised at the last second. Shelter, coverings, dry fuel, and clothing all require planning ahead. A cold evening becomes dangerous long before the temperature itself feels severe. Several adults sit together repairing hides. You move closer and lower yourself beside them. The work is slow and rhythmic. One person scrapes the inner surface of a skin using a stone scraper shaped earlier that morning. Another twists sinew carefully between their fingers, creating strong thread. Nearby, someone punches small holes along the edge of a hide using a sharpened bone point. The smell is strong here. Smoke, animal fat, wet leather, earth. At first it seems unpleasant to your modern senses, but after a while it becomes strangely grounding. These smells mean protection. A good hide covering can block wind, preserve warmth, and help someone survive a freezing night. Humans living 70,000 years ago likely depended heavily on animal skins for clothing, bedding, shelter coverings, carrying bags, and insulation. The archaeological evidence is indirect because soft materials decay easily over time, but stone scraping tools, bone awls, and preserved wear patterns strongly suggest hide preparation played a major role in daily life. You touch one of the finished hides. It feels thick near the outer edge, but softer toward the centre where it has been worked longer. Smoke has darkened parts of it. The surface is uneven, carrying scars and natural patterns from the animal's body. Nothing about it resembles modern factory clothing with identical stitching and carefully selected colours. Yet this hide matters more than fashion ever could. Nearby, a young woman wraps fur around a child's shoulders and checks the fit near the neck. Cold air enters easily through openings, so the covering is adjusted carefully. The child wiggles impatiently while another adult tries not to laugh. Some things never change. Children throughout history appear to have maintained a firm commitment to resisting practical clothing whenever possible. You watch the older woman thread sinew through small openings along a hide edge. Her fingers move with practiced certainty. Pull, tighten, pull again. The stitching is not decorative, though there is beauty in its precision. Every stitch helps hold warmth close to the body. Every repair extends usefulness through another season. Ancient tool sites and bone discoveries hint that humans may have developed increasingly tailored clothing as they spread into colder regions. Simple drape skins likely existed alongside fitted covering shaped for movement and insulation. The exact appearance remains uncertain because organic materials rarely survive tens of thousands of years, leaving researchers to reconstruct clothing indirectly from tools and environmental conditions. The evening breeze strengthens slightly. You feel it immediately against exposed skin. The adults working on hides notice too. One reaches for another covering and pulls it closer around their legs without interrupting their stitching. The camp begins gathering inward again. Children are called closer. Bundles of collected roots and branches are arranged near the centre. Dry material is separated carefully from damp fuel. One person checks ember containers carried from the earlier fire. Another sorts through plant fibres, choosing stronger strands for binding work. A detail often overlooked in prehistoric life is how much labour went into maintaining ordinary objects. Clothing frayed, bindings loosened, hide coverings stiffened after rain, carrying straps broke. In modern life, damaged items are often replaced quickly. Here, replacement could cost days of work and valuable materials. Repair was constant. You pick up a strip of sinew lying beside the workers. It feels tough and slightly sticky from preparation. When twisted properly, it forms strong thread capable of holding hide together under strain. Nearby rests a sharpened bone needle, smooth from handling. You realize sewing is far older than most people imagine. Long before woven fabric and spinning wheels, humans already stitch materials together with remarkable care. One of the younger children curls beside an adult wrapped in fur. The fur catches evening light in soft gold and brown tones. You notice how the adults position children near warmer bodies almost automatically. Warmth is shared socially. A lone person loses heat faster. A group preserves it together. Some researchers examining ancient migrations believe advanced clothing may have been essential for human survival in colder climates. Others argue that shelter use, fire management, and cooperative sleeping arrangements mattered just as much. Most likely, survival depended on many overlapping strategies rather than one magical invention. You glance toward the darkening horizon. Clouds move slowly across fading light. Birds pass overhead in a shifting line before disappearing toward distant water. Somewhere beyond sight, larger animals continue moving through the cooling landscape, following their own patterns older than memory. Near the fire area, several adults begin smoking sections of hide over low heat. Thin streams of smoke drift upward, carrying a richer smell now, almost sweet beneath the sharper scent of burning wood. Smoke helps preserve and soften material. It also marks the hides with the familiar scent of camp itself. Everything here absorbs smoke eventually. Hair, skin, tools, Children, shelter coverings. The smell becomes part of belonging. You notice one hide stretched between wooden supports while a man scrapes it carefully with a stone edge. The scraping sound is repetitive and strangely soothing. Scrape. Pause. Pull tighter. Scrape again. The work requires patience more than force. Too much pressure damages the hide. Too little leaves unwanted tissue attached. Skill lives in balance. The fire brightens gradually as fresh fuel catches. Orange light spreads across faces once more. The group settles closer together while evening deepens around them. You can feel temperature dropping steadily now. Cold seeps through the ground and into the air between trees. One fascinating clue from archaeology comes from tiny wear marks found on ancient stone scrapers. These microscopic traces suggest repeated hide working over long periods. Even when the clothing itself vanished long ago, the tools quietly preserved evidence of the labour behind it. You think about the people sitting around you. Nothing protects them except knowledge, preparation, cooperation, and materials gathered carefully from the world around them. There are no heated buildings waiting nearby, no closets full of spare clothing, no waterproof synthetic jackets promising comfort during outdoor adventures designed mostly for social media photographs. Only hide, fire, hands, memory, and yet it is enough. The child beside the older woman yawns heavily and leans against her shoulder. She wraps part of the fur around both of them without pausing her stitching. The movement is so practiced it feels almost unconscious. Night settles fully now. The fire crackles. Smoke drifts upward into darkness. The hides hanging nearby sway gently in the cold wind. And surrounded by stitched fur, soft embers, and the steady work of careful hands, you begin to understand that clothing in this ancient world is not merely something people wear. It is survival shaped into form. The night has passed, and by morning the camp begins to loosen itself from the ground. At first, the movement is subtle. A hide covering is untied from a branch frame. A bundle of dry grass is shaken free of damp leaves. A few stones near the hearth are moved aside. Nothing happens quickly, but piece by piece, the small shelter that felt so steady in darkness becomes portable again. You stand near the edge of the camp and watch the transformation. What seemed like a home only hours ago now becomes materials. Hides are folded, branches are inspected, cordage is untwisted or saved. Useful stones are gathered, ashes scattered carefully. The people do not leave behind a house, because their house was never meant to remain forever. 70,000 years ago, many human groups lived through movement. They followed water, animals, seasonal plants, safer weather, and remembered pathways across the land. Their shelters had to match that rhythm. Some places offered caves or rock overhangs, but open-air camps were often built from materials that could be carried, reused, repaired, or gathered again nearby. You help lift one edge of a hide. It is heavier than it looked, especially where dampness has settled into it. The surface smells of smoke, rain, and animal fat. Your fingers find old stitch marks and patch sections from earlier damage. This hide has probably sheltered children, covered sleeping bodies, blocked wind, wrapped supplies, and perhaps even carried food. It is not only a wall, it is many things, depending on the day. One subtle detail from prehistoric life involved this kind of flexible use. A single object might serve as clothing, bedding, roof, bundle wrap, or windbreak. People could not afford to carry useless things for long distances. Every item had to justify its weight, which is a lesson many modern suitcases could learn before being stuffed with shoes no one wears. Near the fire, two adults dismantle a low frame made from bent branches. Some branches are left behind because they are too warped or cracked. Others are kept because they can be used again. A young boy tries to pull a cord loose and fails. An older man shows him how to twist before pulling, easing tension from the knot. The boy tries again. This time, it works. The lesson is brief. The knowledge stays. Fragments from ancient campsites suggest that early humans returned to certain favourable locations again and again. A flat area near water, a protected ridge, a cave mouth, or a stand of useful trees could become part of a group's seasonal memory. The shelters themselves vanished, but stone tools, hearth remains, bones, and pigment traces sometimes reveal repeated human presence. You look around and imagine this place after the group leaves. The grass will rise again, rain will soften footprints, ash will darken the soil for a while, then fade. A few broken flakes may remain hidden in the dirt for tens of thousands of years, waiting for hands from another age to find them and wonder who sat here. The group continues packing. Children carry small bundles. Adults take heavier loads. The oldest members carry what they can, but not more than they should. Everyone's body matters. A person overloaded today may slow everyone tomorrow. There is no extra vehicle following behind with snacks and camping chairs, which is probably for the best, though one imagines the group would appreciate the snacks. You notice how carefully weight is balanced. A hide bundle across the shoulders, a pouch at the hip, tools wrapped so sharp edges do not cut through, dry tinder protected inside bark and fibre. Food kept close enough to reach. Nothing is random. The arrangement of carried items is its own technology. The archaeological picture remains blurred in places because shelters made from wood, hide, grass, and fibre rarely survive. Stone lasts. Bone sometimes lasts. Ash may last. But the soft architecture of daily life often disappears. Even so, researchers can study post holes, hearth placement, artifact scatters, and patterns of wear to imagine how people created temporary homes in ancient landscapes. You walk toward a nearby rock overhang where some of the group stored materials during the rain. The stone above is dark from old moisture. The air beneath it feels cooler, stiller. Someone has placed a few useful stones near the back, perhaps because this location is known and may be used again. You touch the rock surface, cold and rough beneath your palm. A cave or overhang like this offers protection, but also limits. It may be damp, it may be occupied by animals, it may be too far from food or water. Shelter is never just shelter. It is location, weather, visibility, smoke flow, drainage, distance to fuel, distance to danger, space for children, space for tools, space for sleep. You begin to understand how much thinking hides inside the word camp. A woman kneels and presses her hand into the ground where water gathered overnight. She shakes her head, then gestures toward higher land. Perhaps this place will not be used again after heavy rains. Perhaps another nearby spot is better. The group's memory adjusts quietly. No one writes it down. Everyone who matters simply knows. A small child picks up a curved branch and drags it behind them, leaving a line through damp soil. An adult calls softly and the child returns, still holding the branch like a treasure. Maybe it will be useful, maybe not. The adult examines it, snaps off a weekend, and adds the better piece to a bundle. Even a child's random discovery can become material if someone knows what to see. What survives from this period is incomplete. Yet the logic of mobile shelter is clear. Humans endured by making homes that could appear, protect, and disappear again. A camp was not less meaningful because it was temporary. It was meaningful because it served the moment well. By midday, the place looks different. The sleeping area is gone. The hide frames are gone. The bundles are ready. Only the hearth remains, subdued and quiet, with its ash spread thin. The fire that felt like the heart of the world last night has become a memory carried in embers, smoke scent, and warm knowledge. The group gathers. Someone glances over the camp one last time, checking for forgotten tools or useful scraps. Another adjusts a load on their shoulder. Children are counted with the casual seriousness of people who know children, have a talent for wandering toward exactly the wrong object. Then the group begins moving. You follow, Behind you, the abandoned camp settles into silence. Grass stirs. A bird lands near the ash, tilts its head, and hops away. The land receives the place back without ceremony. Ahead, the path bends toward higher ground and scattered trees. The people carry their shelter with them in hides, cords, tools, memory, and practiced hands. They carry home not as one fixed building, but as an ability to make warmth, to block wind, to gather close, to turn branches and skins into a small safe space beneath an enormous sky. And as you walk with them into the pale afternoon, you realize that home, in this ancient world, is not where people stop forever. Home is what they know how to create wherever survival allows them to rest. The land unfolds slowly before you as the group continues moving across the afternoon plains. No road marks the way, no signs point towards safety, only memory, weather, sunlight, landmarks, and accumulated experience guide the people ahead of you. One adult walks slightly farther forward than the others, scanning the terrain with calm attention. Another occasionally turns to check that everyone remains close enough together. Children drift and return like small birds, never completely still, though always watched. The air feels cooler now than it did earlier beside the river. Wind moves freely across open ground, flattening grass in pale rippling waves. In the distance, dark hills rise against the horizon, softened by haze. Somewhere beyond them may lie another water source, another sheltering ridge, another seasonal path known only through generations of repeated travel. Movement is part of life here, not wandering without purpose, but travelling through remembered patterns, following animals, following rain, avoiding dangerous cold, returning to useful places at certain times of year. The rhythm of survival stretches across landscapes larger than any single camp. Environmental studies of prehistoric climates suggest that ancient humans often lived through dramatic seasonal changes. Water sources shifted, herds migrated, plant availability rose and fell. Human groups that adapted successfully could survive difficult cycles that might otherwise lead to hunger or conflict. You feel the ground changing beneath your feet. Dry soil gives way to scattered stone, then softer earth again. Small plants brush your ankles as you walk. Dust rises briefly from footsteps where the afternoon sun has dried the surface. Nearby, one child pauses to examine an insect crawling across a rock before being gently encouraged forward again. The pace remains steady. No one wastes energy hurrying without reason. One detail many people underestimate about long-distance movement is how physically careful it must have been. Injuries could become serious problems. A twisted ankle, infected cut, or damaged foot might slow an entire group. Ancient travel was not only about endurance, it was also about avoiding unnecessary harm. You notice how people step. They avoid loose stones. They shift weight naturally over uneven ground. They cross shallow dips without sudden movement. Even the children are learning this rhythm. The older woman walking near you adjusts the hide bundle across her shoulders. Another adult notices immediately and offers to carry part of the load for a while. The exchange happens without ceremony. No dramatic gratitude. No argument about independence. Just practical cooperation. In this world, preserving the group matters more than proving personal toughness. The surviving evidence from prehistoric migration routes hints that humans were capable of extraordinary journeys over many generations. Slowly, gradually, populations expanded into new regions, adapting to unfamiliar environments along the way. Rivers, coastlines, valleys, and animal corridors may have acted as natural pathways guiding movement through vast territories. Cloud shadows drift across the plains. The sunlight changes colour constantly as afternoon deepens. At times the grass glows gold. A few moments later everything becomes muted beneath passing shade. The wind carries scents from far away, now dry earth, distant water, crushed vegetation, and occasionally the faint musk of animals. The hunters at the front pause. Everyone slows automatically. You follow their gaze toward a distant rise where several dark shapes move slowly across the horizon. Animals, too far away to identify clearly, but large enough to hold attention. The group does not change direction immediately. Instead, they observe. You realize movement itself requires constant decision-making. Continue toward shelter. Follow possible food. Avoid exposed ground before darkness. Ancient travel was never just walking. It was continuous judgment shaped by weather, hunger, memory, and caution. Some researchers believe humans became especially successful because of this flexible decision-making ability. Rather than depending on one habitat or one food source, they adjusted behavior repeatedly as conditions changed. Others point out that survival also depended heavily on social cooperation and luck, because even skilled groups faced unpredictable dangers. The wind strengthens briefly. You pull your hide covering closer around your shoulders. Fine dust moves across the ground in soft streaks. Nearby, one of the children begins humming quietly while walking. The sound drifts through the group for a moment before disappearing into the open air. Travel creates its own atmosphere. Footsteps, breathing, shifting bundles, occasional voices, the soft click of carried tools, the whisper of grass. You imagine how many thousands of journeys like this filled human history before roads, wheels, and written maps, camps forming, camps dissolving, people crossing valleys beneath changing skies while carrying everything necessary for survival on their backs and in their memories. Ahead, the land slopes downward toward a line of trees. The group angles toward it carefully. Trees may offer fuel, shelter from wind, and signs of water nearby. They may also conceal animals or hazards. Every promising place contains uncertainty. A subtle clue often noticed at ancient campsites is the presence of materials carried from distant locations. Stone types, shells, pigments, or plant remains sometimes appear far from their natural sources. These traces suggest movement across surprisingly large areas, or connections between groups through exchange and travel. You enter the trees slowly. The temperature changes almost at once. Shade cools the air. The ground becomes softer beneath layers of leaves. Bird calls echo overhead, sharper here than out on the open plains. Sunlight filters through branches in scattered patches that move gently with the wind. Several adults stop to examine broken branches and disturbed soil near the edge of the grove. Fresh signs again. Perhaps animals passed recently. Perhaps another human group. The possibility hangs quietly in the air. You notice how alert everyone becomes without appearing frightened. Humans in this era lived among predators, rival groups, and uncertain conditions. Yet constant panic would waste energy and cloud judgment. Awareness mattered more than fear. The group continues deeper into the grove. Someone finds evidence of old fire ash near a cluster of stones. Not recent, but not ancient either. Another camp may once have rested here during another season. You stare at the faint dark soil and wonder who sat beside that fire, what stories they carried, where they travelled afterward. No answer remains, only traces. The older man kneels beside the ash and touches it thoughtfully before standing again. The group exchanges a few quiet words. You cannot understand the language itself, but the meaning feels clear enough. Others have passed through this land. Others survived here too. The light between the trees grows dimmer now as evening approaches. Children are called closer again. Bundles are lowered briefly while several adults inspect the area for shelter possibilities. A fallen tree nearby blocks part of the wind. Higher ground sits just beyond the grove, dry enough for another camp. Already the group begins thinking about fire, sleep, warmth, and tomorrow's movement. The journey never fully stops. It only pauses, and as you stand among the trees with tired legs, cool air against your skin, and the fading smell of sun-warmed grass drifting behind you. You understand that ancient humans survived this harsh world, partly because they learned how to keep moving through it together, carrying knowledge across landscapes one careful step at a time. Evening settles gently through the trees. The group has chosen a place to rest near the edge of the grove where the ground rises slightly above the damp lower earth. Fallen branches provide easy fuel. Nearby rocks help block some of the wind. The smell of leaves and old wood hangs in the cooling air while the last pale sunlight filters through branches overhead. Once again, the camp begins to take shape, not with walls or permanent foundations, but through familiar actions repeated countless times before. Bundles are lowered carefully. Children are gathered closer. Dry material is sorted from damp material. Someone clears leaves from the centre of the resting area while another arranges stones near the new hearth. The work unfolds almost silently because everyone already knows what comes next. You kneel beside the fire as it slowly catches. First smoke, then a dull glow, then thin yellow flame licking through dry grass and bark. Soon the warmth begins spreading outward into the cool evening air. Faces soften in the light, tired shoulders lower slightly. The day's movement settles into stillness, and with stillness comes talking. Not formal speeches, not long dramatic storytelling with perfect structure and emotional background music, just human voices moving through darkness. Before writing existed, spoken language carried nearly everything important: instructions, warnings, jokes, memories, directions, relationships, and stories all depended on voices surviving in human minds. Some researchers believe increasingly complex language may have been one of humanity's greatest survival advantages, allowing knowledge to travel far beyond what one person could discover alone. You listen carefully. At first, the conversations seem fragmented. A few words, a gesture, someone pointing toward the direction travelled earlier, another mentioning animals seen near the river, a child interrupting with excitement before being gently redirected. But gradually you begin noticing patterns. Tone matters, rhythm matters, expression matters. Meaning travels through more than words alone. An older man near the fire imitates the movement of an animal spotted during the day. Several children laugh quietly. Another adult adds something to the story. And now even the tired woman stitching hide smiles briefly. Humour survives here too. Of course it does. Human beings have probably been making each other laugh since long before anyone invented taxes, which may actually explain why humour evolved in the first place. The fire crackles softly between pauses in conversation. You notice how everyone faces inward now. Darkness beyond the camp has become thick again, but inside the firelight there is warmth, movement, language, and shared attention. The camp becomes a listening space. One of the children begins tracing shapes in the dirt beside the hearth. An adult notices and draws beside them, perhaps showing the shape of tracks or a path. Another child watches closely. Nothing is written in the modern sense, but communication already stretches beyond spoken sound. Gesture, imitation, expression, and visual memory all work together. Clues from ancient human anatomy suggest that by this period people likely possessed vocal abilities very similar to our own. The structure of the throat, tongue control, hearing adaptations, and brain development all point towards sophisticated communication. Exactly what those ancient languages sounded like is impossible to know now, but the need for detailed communication was almost certainly enormous. You look around the circle. Every person here carries knowledge others depend on. One knows where dry wood can still be found after rain. Another remembers safe river crossings. Another understands hide preparation. Another tracks animals. Another calms frightened children. Language allows all of this to spread. Without speech, each person survives mostly alone inside their own experience. With speech, memory becomes shared property. A young boy near the fire suddenly points upward through the branches. Everyone glances toward the sky. The clouds have thinned. revealing early stars appearing one by one above the dark trees. Someone says something softly, and several adults nod. Perhaps they're discussing weather, perhaps direction, perhaps a story tied to certain stars. There are hints that early humans may already have connected celestial patterns with movement, seasons, or storytelling traditions, though the evidence remains difficult to prove directly. The night sky would have been one of the most constant features in human life, visible across generations without interruption from artificial light. The older woman beside you begins speaking in a slower rhythm now. Children lean closer automatically. This feels different from ordinary conversation. Perhaps a memory, perhaps a warning, perhaps a story carried from older camps and older fires. Her hands move while she speaks. She shapes invisible things in the air. At moments, her voice lowers enough that listeners must lean forward slightly. The children stay unusually quiet. You realize stories here are not entertainment separated from survival. Stories remember dangerous places. Stories remember animal behavior. Stories remember social rules. Stories preserve the dead. Stories explain fear. Stories comfort children during storms. Stories teach patience. A detail often overlooked in prehistoric life is how much information oral cultures can preserve without writing. Modern people sometimes assume memory becomes weak without books or screens, but oral traditions can hold astonishing complexity when communities rely on them daily. The fire settles lower. Smoke drifts upward through branches, carrying sparks into the dark canopy above. Somewhere deeper in the grove, an animal moves briefly through leaves before falling silent again. No one ignores the sound. Several adults glance outward automatically, then relax once more. Conversation resumes. You notice how people take turns speaking. Interruptions happen, but gently. A younger adult begins describing something from earlier travel, using hands to show distance or direction. Another corrects part of the account, and quiet laughter follows. Human beings 70,000 years ago were fully capable of disagreement, correction, exaggeration, and probably telling stories that became slightly better every time they were repeated. Some anthropologists suspect storytelling itself strengthened social bonds by creating shared emotional experiences within groups. Others suggest language became essential for coordinating increasingly complex survival strategies. Most likely it served many purposes at once because humans rarely use communication for only one thing. You lean back slightly and stare at the fire. The voices around you rise and fall like another part of the night landscape. Not loud enough to disturb the darkness completely, just enough to keep loneliness away. Children begin drifting towards sleep one by one. A small girl rests her head against an adult's leg while still listening to the older woman speak. Another child falls asleep before the story finishes entirely. No one wakes them. The story continues anyway, flowing around sleeping bodies and glowing embers alike. You think about how fragile spoken words seem. Nothing written, nothing carved, only breath. Yet somehow language carried humanity across continents, through storms, hunger, migration, and fear. Entire worlds survived inside memory long before ink touched paper. The fire lowers again. Voices soften. Above the trees, stars brighten slowly in the ancient sky. And there in the flickering light, among tired travellers wrapped in hide and smoke scent, you begin to feel how deeply human survival depended not only on tools or fire, but on the simple act of people speaking to one another in the dark. The night deepens until the grove becomes almost entirely black beyond the fire. For a while, everyone remains close to the warmth, listening to the older woman's voice fade into softer conversation. Children sleep beneath hides. Adults sit with knees drawn up, their faces turning gold and shadow in the firelight. Smoke lifts slowly through the branches, and above it the stars remain bright, patient, and cold. Then, after a long quiet stretch, several people rise. Not everyone. Only a few. You watch as they gather small items with deliberate care, a bundle wrapped in hide, a few stone flakes, a piece of charred wood, and something kept carefully inside a small container. The mood changes slightly, not into fear, but into attention. The kind of attention that says what happens next is not ordinary travel, not food gathering, not simple repair. You follow at a little distance. The group moves away from the camp, past the edge of the trees and toward a dark line of stone rising from the hillside. The path is narrow. Damp leaves soften your steps. The night smells of cold rock, wet soil, smoke clinging to clothing, and the faint sweetness of crushed plants beneath your feet. Ahead, the hillside opens into a shallow cave. The entrance is not grand. It does not announce itself like a palace doorway. It is simply a dark mouth in the stone, half hidden by brush and shadow. Yet the people approach it carefully, as if the space matters. By this era, humans were capable of symbolic behavior, though its forms varied across regions and time. Pigments, ornaments, engraved objects, and marked surfaces from ancient sites suggest that people were doing more than only surviving physically. They were also shaping meaning, identity, memory, and perhaps belief through objects and images. The evidence is scattered, but it is powerful. You step inside. The air changes immediately, cooler, still, heavier with mineral dampness. The fire from the camp is now behind you, visible only as a faint glow through trees. One person carries a small flame protected in bark and fibre. Another shelters it with their body. The little light trembles against the cave wall, revealing uneven stone, shallow cracks, and patches of old mineral colour. Your breathing sounds louder here. Even the smallest movement echoes gently. The group stops a short distance inside, where the ceiling lowers and the wall widens into a smoother surface. Someone unwraps the bundle. Inside are pieces of coloured earth red ochre, dark charcoal, perhaps pale clay or crushed mineral. The colours look muted in low light, but when touched by flame, the red seems to wake. One remarkable detail hidden in the archaeological record is how widely ancient peoples used ochre. Red pigments appear at many prehistoric sites, sometimes connected with body decoration, object marking, hide treatment, or symbolic practices. No one can say that every piece of ochre meant the same thing everywhere, because humans have always enjoyed making interpretation difficult. Still, the repeated use suggests it mattered. A woman grinds the red material against a flat stone. Slowly, carefully. The sound is soft but steady, like dry earth whispering against itself. She adds a little liquid, perhaps water, fat, or something else prepared for mixing. The pigment darkens, thickens, becomes paint. You stand close enough to smell it. Earthy, metallic, faintly smoky from the firelight. A man dips his fingers into the mixture and presses them against the stone wall. Not a picture yet, just contact. His hand rests there for a breath, then lifts away, leaving a reddish mark. Another person watches, then begins drawing a line with a piece of charcoal. The line curves, stops, continues in the wavering light. It becomes difficult to tell whether the shape is an animal, a memory of an animal, or something less literal. A back, a horn, a moving body, a sign known only to those who made it. Some of the strongest evidence for early image making comes from later Paleolithic cave art, especially in Europe and parts of Asia, though symbolic markings and pigment use extend much deeper into the human past. Researchers continue piecing together how early communities may have used such marks. Some interpret them as ritual, teaching, memory, identity, or storytelling. Others warn that modern labels may be too narrow for ancient minds. You watch a child hold their breath near the wall. An adult guides the child's hand toward the stone but does not force it. The child touches the surface lightly, Cold rock meets warm skin. The moment is quiet enough that you hear a drop of water fall somewhere deeper inside the cave. This is not art in the modern gallery sense. There are no labels beside the images, no polite visitors pretending to understand everything, no gift shop at the exit selling tiny carved mammoths, though honestly that would probably do well. Here, the act feels closer to presence, a way of saying we were here, we saw, we remembered, we belong to this place for a time. The flame shifts, and the marks on the wall seem to move. A charcoal curve becomes an animal shoulder, a red smear becomes breath, a handprint becomes someone standing beside you across time. You think of the child's clay handprint from the earlier clearing, made in play and soon erased. Here, on stone, a mark may last longer, not forever, perhaps, but long enough to outlive the people who made it by a distance almost impossible to imagine. The clues left behind are incomplete, but they hint at a mind already reaching beyond the present moment. A stone tool solves an immediate problem. A footprint records passing movement, but a mark on a cave wall suggests memory made visible, experience placed outside the body, perhaps shared with others who come later. The older woman speaks softly. Her voice barely rises above the cave's stillness. The others listen. The sound travels strangely along the stone, turning each syllable into something rounder and older. You cannot know whether she's telling a story, naming an animal, remembering someone or guiding the act itself. But the listeners are still, and the cave seems to hold the words. Another hand touches the wall. Another mark appears. You notice that pigments stain the fingers and settle into skin creases, red under nails, charcoal across knuckles. These marks will return to camp on the bodies of the makers. The cave does not keep all of it. Some meaning travels back with them. After a while, the group begins wrapping the pigments again. The flame is protected. The wall is left in darkness. You take one final look as the light withdraws. The marks fade slowly, not disappearing all at once, but sinking back into stone as if the cave is closing its eyes. Outside, the night air feels warmer than the cave. The campfire glows through the trees. Sleeping bodies wait beneath hides. The ordinary world returns smoke, cold, children, tools, hunger, tomorrow's path. Yet something has changed. You have seen humans do more than endure the world. You have seen them answer it with colour, memory, and touch. In a harsh landscape where every day demands practical skill, they still make room for marks that speak softly into darkness. And as you walk back toward the fire, red pigment drying on ancient hands nearby, you feel how survival is not only staying alive, it is remembering that life means something while you do. When you return to the camp, the fire has settled into a calmer glow. Most of the children are asleep now beneath layered hides and fur coverings. A few adults remain awake near the hearth, speaking quietly while tending food over low coals. The grove around you has become almost entirely silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves and the soft crack of burning wood. After the cool stillness of the cave, the smell of cooking reaches you immediately. Warm, smoky, rich with animal fat and damp earth. Your stomach notices before your thoughts do. One person kneels beside a flat stone positioned near the coals. Upon it rest strips of meat cut into narrow pieces. Another adult turns roots slowly within ash, using a stick blackened from earlier fires. Nearby, a shallow hide container holds gathered berries and plant stems from the day's travel. Nothing here resembles a feast in the modern sense. No overflowing tables, no polished bowls, no carefully photographed meals arranged for strangers online. And yet the quiet care surrounding this food gives it importance. People moving through landscapes like this likely depended on meals that changed constantly with season, location, weather, and luck. Some days may have brought successful hunting. Others relied more heavily on gathered plants, shellfish, insects, roots, or leftovers from earlier kills. Flexibility mattered more than consistency. You sit near the warmth and watch the cooking. Fat drips slowly from one strip of meat onto the coals, sending up a brief hiss and a stronger smell that drifts through the camp. A child stirs in sleep nearby but does not wake fully. Someone turns the meat carefully so it does not burn too quickly. The firelight makes everything appear slower. Hands move carefully. Voices remain low. Steam rises gently from heated roots split open beside the ash. One of the adults hands you a roasted root. The outside is blackened slightly, but the inside has softened. When you break it apart, pale steam escapes into the cool night air. The smell is earthy and faintly sweet. You taste it carefully. Warmth spreads through your mouth first, then bitterness, then sweetness again. Food here is not entertainment. It is energy transformed through labour, memory, and fire. Excavated hearths quietly show that humans had been cooking food for a very long time before this era. Burned bones, charred plant remains, heated stones, and ash layers all point toward repeated cooking practices. Cooking made many foods safer, softer, and easier to digest, allowing humans to gain more energy from limited resources. You notice how the group shares food. Children first, older adults next, others afterward. No one grabs greedily. That does not mean prehistoric people were perfectly peaceful saints floating through life in eternal cooperation. Human beings have always been human beings. But in a small survival group, repeated selfishness could become dangerous very quickly. A young man cuts meat into smaller portions with a stone flake sharpened earlier in the journey. The edge glints briefly in firelight. Beside him, another person crushes gathered seeds using a rounded stone against a flat surface. The grinding sound blends softly with crackling wood. Tiny surviving traces suggest that humans processed plant foods in more ways than once imagined. Residues found on ancient tools sometimes reveal starch grains, crushed seeds, or plant fibers. Even when organic material disappears, microscopic evidence can still whisper across thousands of years. The older woman from the cave sits quietly near the edge of the firelight. Red pigment still stains faintly along one finger. She eats slowly, pausing often between bites. Beside her, a sleeping child turns and presses closer against her leg without waking. She adjusts the fur around them automatically while continuing to chew. You realize meals are doing many things at once here. People eat, rest, talk, repair tools, watch children, observe the fire, plan movement, remember stories. Meals hold the group together physically and socially. A detail often missed in discussions of prehistoric food is how much chewing ancient people likely did. Tough roots, dried meat, fibrous plants, and minimally processed foods required strong jaws and patient eating. Meals were slower. There was no hurried swallowing while staring at glowing screens and pretending multitasking counts as living. One of the hunters finally speaks more fully about the animals seen earlier in the day. Hands gesture through the air, describing direction and movement. Another adult interrupts briefly, disagreeing about the path taken near the ridge. The discussion remains calm. Children listening nearby absorb every detail, whether anyone formally teaches them or not. Knowledge travels beside dinner. The fire brightens as fresh fuel catches. Orange light spreads across hanging hides, stacked bundles and tired faces. Smoke curls upward into the branches overhead. Somewhere beyond the grove, an animal calls once in the darkness, long and distant. Everyone pauses for a moment to listen. Then conversation resumes. The remains discovered at ancient campsites imply that hearths often became centers of repeated activity. Cooking, tool-making, social interaction, and sleeping areas frequently clustered around fire. The hearth was not simply practical. It organized space itself. You feel the truth of that while sitting here. The darkness beyond camp feels enormous again, yet inside the circle of warmth there is structure. Food passes from hand to hand. Voices rise and soften. Children sleep. Someone laughs quietly at a remark you cannot understand. Another person stretches tired legs toward the coals. The roasted roots continue cooking beneath ash. One adult removes them carefully using 2 sticks. Their outer skin peels back easily now, revealing softer flesh inside. Steam rises into the cool air, carrying a rich, earthy scent. You think about how many thousands of evenings like this filled human history. Meals beside fires, tired travellers, smoke and clothing, shared food after long movement across uncertain landscapes. No written records survive from those nights. No names, no recipes, no preserved conversations. Yet the rhythm feels deeply familiar all the same. A child wakes briefly and reaches for food without fully opening their eyes. An adult tears off a softer piece and places it gently into the child's hand, half asleep. The child chews slowly, then curls back beneath fur coverings. The movement is so ordinary it becomes beautiful. Some scientists now lean toward the idea that cooperative food sharing played a major role in human social evolution. Sharing resources may have strengthened bonds, supported children and elders, and reduced risk during difficult seasons. Others caution that food distribution likely varied depending on environment, pressure, and group dynamics. Human life has never been perfectly simple. The fire settles lower again. People eat more slowly now. A few adults begin preparing sleeping areas while others continue talking quietly beside the embers. Bones stripped clean are set aside carefully. Useful scraps are not wasted. Even after the meal ends, work continues in small ways. You lean closer to the warmth and watch sparks rise into the dark canopy overhead. The grove smells of smoke, cooked roots, damp bark, and cooling ash. Around you, tired bodies settle towards sleep while the last food of the evening disappears into quiet hands. And there beside the fading fire, surrounded by simple meals shaped from effort, patience, and shared labour, you begin to understand that survival in this harsh ancient world depended not only on finding food, but on turning food into comfort, memory, and connection at the end of another difficult day. Deep into the night the grove changes. Not visibly at first, the fire still glows low beneath layers of ash. Sleeping bodies remain wrapped in hides near the warmth. Branches overhead move gently whenever wind slips through them. Yet something in the atmosphere tightens. The kind of change you feel before you fully understand it. You wake slowly to the sound of someone shifting nearby. Not panic, just movement. One of the adults sitting watchers turn toward the trees beyond camp. Their posture is still listening. Another adult nearby quietly lifts their head from beneath a fur covering. No one speaks loudly. No one rushes. The night remains calm but alert. You stay still and listen too. At first you hear only familiar sounds. Fire settling softly. Leaves brushing against one another. A distant insect. Then, farther out in the darkness, comes another sound. A branch cracking. Not close, but large enough to matter. In this world, danger rarely announces itself dramatically. Survival often depends on noticing the small things before they become immediate threats. A strange sound, a sudden silence among birds, fresh tracks where none existed before. The people around you understand this deeply. One adult feeds a little more wood into the fire, not enough to create a blaze, just enough to strengthen the glow around camp. Light matters at night, so does visibility, so does appearing awake. Ancient predator remains, and human campsites occasionally appear within the same regions, reminding researchers that humans shared landscapes with large carnivores for thousands of years. Lions, hyenas, wolves, leopards, bears, and other dangerous animals were part of the ordinary environment depending on location. Humans were intelligent and cooperative, but they were not untouchable. The cracking sound comes again. Closer now, several adults are fully awake. A spear is lifted quietly from beside a sleeping place. Another person adds dry branches to the fire with practiced calm. Children continue sleeping for the moment. protected inside the center of the group, you notice something important. No one behaves recklessly brave. No one charges into darkness trying to prove themselves. Caution is respected here. The fire brightens slightly, sending sparks upward into the trees. Smoke thickens for a moment, carrying sharp wood scent across the grove. The adults closest to the edge of camp stare into the darkness beyond the light. Then everything goes quiet. Even the leaves seem to pause. You realize silence itself can become frightening when the world suddenly stops making ordinary sounds. One subtle clue preserved in ancient camps is the repeated placement of hearths near sleeping areas and entrances. Fire likely offered more than warmth, light, smoke, visibility, and social gathering all contributed to protection during vulnerable nighttime hours. A child stirs beside you and opens sleepy eyes. An adult places a hand gently across the child's shoulder before they can sit up fully. The touch says stay calm without needing words. Another crack sounds from farther left this time. Then movement. Large movement. Brush shifting heavily. The adults nearest the edge of camp adjust position slightly, forming a loose line between the darkness and the sleeping area. Spears remain lowered but ready. Firelight catches along sharpened stone points for brief moments, before shadow hides them again. Your own breathing slows, not because you are fearless, because everyone else is controlling fear carefully. That control spreads through the group almost like warmth. The surviving evidence suggests that human cooperation during dangerous situations may have been one of the species' greatest advantages. Individually, humans lacked claws, heavy fur, or exceptional speed. Together, however, they combined communication, tools, planning, fire, and coordinated awareness. The darkness beyond camp shifts once more. Then suddenly, several glowing eyes appear between the trees, low to the ground. Watching. The fire pops sharply beside you. One adult lifts a burning branch from the edge of the hearth and steps forward carefully. Another strikes wood against stone to send sparks outward. The glowing eyes pause. A predator? Perhaps more than one, not attacking, only watching. The animal likely smells food, smoke, hides, and human bodies gathered together. It may be deciding whether the risk is worth approaching further. Humans living through environments like this learned quickly that many dangerous encounters ended not through violence, but through deterrence, fire, noise, group presence, weapons, and confidence could discourage predators without direct conflict. Avoiding injury mattered enormously in a world without hospitals or antibiotics. The burning branch moves slowly through the dark air. Smoke trails behind it. The glowing eyes blink once, then vanish briefly. You hear movement circling wider through the grove. The adults shift again to follow the sound. Nobody chases. Nobody relaxes fully either. The tension remains balanced carefully between caution and restraint. One detail often overlooked in prehistoric survival is how exhausting constant awareness could become. Even rest required listening. Even sleep happened inside a system of shared vigilance where someone remained alert while others recovered. The fire grows stronger now. Children are quietly repositioned farther inward. One wakes fully and begins to whimper softly, confused by the movement around camp. An older woman pulls the child close and murmurs reassurance while keeping her own eyes fixed toward the trees. You notice how many people are doing different things simultaneously. Watching the forest, protecting children, managing the fire, holding weapons, listening for movement, staying calm enough to think clearly. This is survival as coordination rather than chaos. The predator sounds begin fading slowly. Brush movement retreats deeper into darkness. The glowing eyes do not return. Eventually, distant night sounds begin recovering one by one. Insects again. Leaves again. Wind again. The grove exhales. So do the people. No celebration follows. No dramatic relief. Only gradual relaxation. One adult lowers their spear and sits near the fire once more. Another rubs tired eyes with smoke-darkened fingers. Someone adds another branch to the coals, smaller this time. The danger passed because the group stayed aware together, not because they were the strongest creatures in the forest. Far from it. A fascinating pattern in human evolution is how much energy appears to have gone into social intelligence and cooperation, rather than raw physical power. Humans survived partly by becoming extraordinarily good at reading one another, coordinating behaviour, sharing information, and responding collectively under pressure. The child beside the older woman has already fallen asleep again. The adults remain awake longer now, though their voices stay low. Occasionally someone glances back toward the trees, but the immediate tension is gone. The firelight softens once more across hides, tools, and tired faces. You lean closer to the warmth. Smoke drifts into your hair and clothing again. The earth beneath you feels cold but solid. Above the branches, faint stars still shine through gaps in the canopy as if nothing unusual happened at all. And perhaps that is the strangest part. Danger in this ancient world is rarely extraordinary. It is ordinary, expected, managed through patience, preparation, shared attention, and steady nerves. As the fire settles lower toward glowing embers once again, you understand that humans survived harsh landscapes not because fear disappeared, but because they learned how to live beside fear without letting it break the group apart. The grove returns to quiet after the danger passes, but the group does not immediately fall back into deep sleep. People remain closer together now, not afraid exactly, but reminded. The night has shown its teeth for a moment, then withdrawn. A few adults keep watch near the fire. Others lie back beneath hides, listening longer than before. Children sleep in the safest centre of the camp, tucked between warm bodies and rolled coverings. You sit near the embers, feeling the slow warmth against your knees. Smoke moves in thin layers through the cold air. The smell of burned wood has settled into everything again. Across the fire, the older woman rests with one arm around the child who woke during the disturbance. The child's breathing is slow now, face half hidden in fur. Okay, like this is easy to overlook. It does not leave stone points behind. It does not survive as a dramatic skeleton posed in a museum case. But without care, no group lasts very long. The night routines of communities like this were shaped by more than danger from animals or weather. They were shaped by relationships. People survived because they fed each other, watched over children, remembered the old, shared warnings, repaired one another's mistakes, and stayed close when fear might have scattered them. You notice how the group settles after tension. One adult speaks softly to another, perhaps retelling the moment when the eyes appeared beyond the trees. Someone else makes a low sound that might be amusement. Not loud laughter, not celebration, just a small release of stress. Even here, after danger, humour returns carefully, like a shy animal at the edge of firelight. A man with tired eyes reaches over and adjusts the position of a sleeping boy whose foot has slipped out from under the hide covering. The gesture is automatic. The boy never wakes. The covering is tucked back around him, and the man returns to watching the dark. That is survival too. Not heroic, not dramatic, just a foot covered before the cold can find it. Several findings from ancient human remains suggest that prehistoric communities sometimes cared for individuals who had injuries, illness, or physical limitations. Such care may not have looked the same everywhere, and the evidence must be read cautiously. But healed bones and long survival after hardship hint at social support. The human story was never only about the strongest walking ahead and leaving the rest behind. You look at the older members of the group. Their bodies carry age differently from modern bodies. There is no soft chair waiting at the end of the day, no medicine cabinet, no warm bath. The lines on their faces come from weather, smoke, sun, worry, and years of watching the world closely. Yet they are not burdens. They are libraries that breathe. The older woman begins checking a child's hair and skin with patient fingers, perhaps looking for insects, small wounds, or irritation. The child is half asleep, leaning against her without protest. Another adult rubs soreness from someone's shoulder using slow pressure. Nearby, a young woman cleans a shallow scrape on her own hand, then lets another person inspect it more carefully. One quiet but important part of survival involved ordinary healthcare. Cleaning wounds, removing thorns, warming chilled bodies, supporting tired walkers, and noticing sickness early could change a person's chances dramatically. These acts rarely sound grand, but in a world without doctors, they mattered every day. The fire collapses inward with a soft sigh. A few coals shift and glow brighter. The movement lights faces for a moment, then fades. You feel the camp breathing together, not in perfect rhythm, of course. Humans are not that poetic when actually asleep. Some snore softly. One child mutters, someone coughs from the smoke. Another person turns over and pulls a hide closer. Still, there is a shared pulse to the space, a sense that no one is entirely alone inside the dark. You remember the cave wall from earlier, the red marks fading as the flame withdrew. You remember the handprint in the mud, the child learning knots, the older man guiding a tracker's eye. Everywhere in this journey, survival has appeared as connection. Hands teaching hands, voices carrying memory, bodies sharing warmth, eyes watching while others sleep. The behaviour seen here may have helped humans endure conditions that would have overwhelmed isolated individuals. Cooperation allowed groups to spread risk. If one person failed to find food, another might succeed. If one slept, another watched. If one forgot, another remembered. Survival became less fragile when it belonged to the group. Across the fire, two adults quietly divide the last small portion of roasted root left from the evening. One passes a piece to the older woman. She breaks it smaller and gives part to the child beside her, though the child barely wakes enough to chew. The adult who offered it says nothing. No ceremony, no speech about generosity. Just food moving toward need. A small thing. A great thing. Modern life often talks about independence as if it were the highest form of strength. Here, independence alone would be a cold and hungry philosophy. People need one another openly. There is no shame in it. The group is not a collection of separate lives temporarily sharing space. It is a living system. You notice affection in small forms. A hand resting briefly on a shoulder. A joke murmured to ease fear. A child sleeping across someone's lap, an older man being offered the warmer side of the fire without anyone making a fuss about it. Much of prehistoric social life must be reconstructed from indirect traces, yet human biology itself offers clues. Long childhoods, emotional bonding, shared attention, and complex communication all point toward a species shaped by relationships. Stone tools show skill, but relationships help decide whether skill could be passed on. The night grows colder again. People shift closer. The fire is fed carefully. Not too much. Not too little. A watcher rises and walks slowly around the edge of camp, listening for any sign that the predator has returned. After a few moments, they come back and sit near the warmth. The darkness feels large, but less empty now. Inside the small circle of light, you see not only survival strategies, but tenderness, practical tenderness, the kind that warms a child before they cry, shares food before hunger sharpens, watches the trees before danger enters, and remembers the weak without needing to call itself kindness. You rest your hands near the coals. Heat touches your fingers. Smoke stings your eyes slightly. Around you, the ancient group settles deeper into night, bound together by need, habit, affection, memory, and the quiet understanding that life is easier to carry when many hands hold it. And in this harsh world 70,000 years ago, that bond may be one of humanity's oldest shelters. Morning arrives slowly through a pale grey mist drifting between the trees. The fires burn low again, though a few coals still glow beneath ash. Someone wakes before dawn to breathe life back into them using dry grass and careful patience. Soon thin smoke curls upward through the cold air, carrying that familiar scent of charred wood and damp earth across the waking camp. You sit up beneath your hide covering and notice how quiet everyone is at first. People waking in this world do not immediately fill the air with noise. They listen before speaking. Wind direction, bird calls, rain, animal movement. Silence itself contains information. A child yawns beside the fire while rubbing sleep from their eyes with smoke-darkened hands. Nearby, 2 adults examine tracks at the edge of camp left during the night. The predator didn't return. Only smaller animal marks cross the damp soil now. The group begins preparing to move again. Bundles are tied, ashes spread, water containers are checked. Children eat small pieces of leftover root while adults speak softly nearby. Then something changes. One of the hunters standing near the edge of the grove freezes for a moment and lifts a hand. Everyone notices, not fear, attention. The hunter points toward a distant rise beyond the trees where faint movement appears through the morning mist. Human movement, not animals, people. You feel the atmosphere shift immediately around camp. Adults stand more carefully. Children are called closer without alarm. Spears are gathered, though not raised aggressively. Nobody rushes forward, yet nobody ignores the sight either. The figures remain distant at first, dark shapes moving slowly along higher ground. Perhaps another small group travelling through the same landscape. Perhaps people searching for water, shelter, food, or safer weather. The world 70,000 years ago held far fewer humans than today, yet encounters still mattered enormously. Ancient populations were scattered across large territories, and groups likely spent long periods isolated from one another before crossing paths again. Genetic evidence, migration patterns, and archaeological discoveries suggest that humans did not live as one continuous connected population, but as many small communities moving through changing landscapes. The mist shifts slightly. Now you can make out more detail. Several adults, children too, bundles carried across shoulders, smoke scent drifting faintly from their direction. People very much like you. Your group remains still while watching them approach the edge of visible distance. No one knows immediately whether the encounter will become friendly, cautious, brief, tense, or simply distant observation before both groups continue separately. The environment rewarded people who could read social situations carefully. Another human group might bring knowledge, exchange opportunities, and potential alliances. They might also compete for food, water, shelter, or hunting territory. Ancient encounters probably varied enormously depending on conditions and previous relationships. One of the older men beside you lowers himself slowly onto a stone while continuing to watch. He does not appear surprised. Perhaps meetings like this happened before. Perhaps stories of other groups travelled through generations long before you arrived here. The approaching people stop at a safe distance beyond the grove. For several quiet moments, neither side moves closer. Smoke drifts upward between you. Birds call somewhere overhead. A child from the other group peeks around an adult's side curiously before being pulled gently back. You realise how important body language becomes when uncertainty fills the air. No sudden movement. No charging forward. No obvious threat. But no carelessness either. One quiet clue preserved in the archaeological record is the movement of materials across surprisingly large areas. Certain stone types, pigments, shells, and crafted objects appear far from their original sources. These findings hint that human groups sometimes exchanged goods, ideas, or social connections across long distances. A woman from the other group steps forward slightly, not enough to close the distance completely, just enough to be seen more clearly. She raises an open hand. One of the adults beside you responds in kind. The tension softens a little, not gone, just less sharp. You study the strangers carefully now. Their clothing resembles your group's clothing, though made differently. Their hide stitching uses another pattern. One carries a necklace of small shells or carved pieces. Another has red pigment brushed along part of the arm. A child clutches a woven bundle against their chest. Different. Familiar? Human. The older woman from your camp speaks quietly to the adults nearest her. You cannot understand the words, but the tone feels thoughtful rather than fearful. Another adult gestures toward the fire as if considering whether to invite the strangers closer. Several discoveries imply that humans during this era already possessed strong social flexibility. Communities may have formed temporary alliances, exchanged mates, shared information, or maintained loose regional connections. Exactly how these relationships worked remains difficult to reconstruct fully, because social behavior leaves only indirect traces behind. The strangers remain patient. Their patience itself feels meaningful. No one forces the moment. Eventually, one of your hunters places a spear down visibly beside a tree and steps back, a careful gesture, not surrender, not weakness, communication. After a pause, one of the strangers lowers their own weapon as well. The air changes again, softer now. Children on both sides begin staring openly at one another with the fearless curiosity children seem to possess in every century. One little boy near you points toward the shells hanging from the stranger's necklace. His mother gently lowers his hand, though she smiles slightly while doing it. A detail often missed in discussions of prehistoric life is how socially complex even small communities may have been. Humans carried memory, reputation, family ties, and learned expectations across generations. Encounters between groups were likely shaped by history that modern archaeology can only partially recover. Fire between the camps is strengthened. Smoke rises thicker now, visible through the mist. One of the strangers produces a small object from a hide pouch and holds it out from a distance first. Stone, perhaps. Pigment. Something useful or symbolic. One of your adults approaches carefully to examine it while others remain watchful. You notice everyone moving slowly, deliberately. Trust builds one careful step at a time. The children begin relaxing first. That feels strangely believable. One girl from the other group laughs quietly when a younger child near your fire trips over a bundle while staring too hard at the newcomers. The embarrassed child quickly stands again pretending nothing happened. An ancient tradition that continues very strongly in modern adulthood. Soon voices begin passing cautiously between the groups. Some words sound familiar, others different. Gestures help fill gaps. Hands point toward rivers, hills, weather, animal movements. Information itself becomes valuable. A distant herd,
a dry valley,
a dangerous predator route, good stone near certain cliffs. The remains left behind suggest careful planning rather than isolated survival. Humans endured partly because knowledge travelled between minds, between generations, and perhaps between groups meeting under uncertain skies like this one. The mist begins lifting slowly as morning grows brighter. Sunlight touches the tops of the trees first. Smoke glows pale gold. The strangers no longer feel entirely strange, not family, not fully trusted, but connected through the same cold nights, the same moving herds, the same search for water and warmth beneath an enormous, unpredictable world, and standing there between two small camps separated only by caution and curiosity. You begin to understand that humanity survived not as scattered individuals alone in darkness, but as networks of memory slowly reaching toward one another across ancient landscapes. By midday, the mist has lifted completely from the grove. Sunlight filters through branches in pale shifting patterns, while the two groups remain near one another, no longer frozen by uncertainty. The distance between camps has shortened carefully over the past hours, not fully erased, but softened enough for conversation, observation, and exchange. Children adapt first. They always do. One little boy from the other group squats beside your camp's fire and watches an older man shape a stone edge. Another child compares shell ornaments with a girl from your own group. both studying the unfamiliar objects with complete seriousness. Adults remain cautious nearby. But the tension that greeted the morning has eased into watchful curiosity. You sit near the edge of the camp and notice how much attention people give to each other's tools, clothing, and behaviour. A carrying knot tied differently, a sharper stone flake, a new way of binding a spear point, a better hide stitch. Knowledge moves quietly between groups long before anyone formally decides to share it. The remains recovered from ancient sites sometimes reveal bursts of innovation spreading across wide regions. Tool styles, pigments, ornaments, and techniques appear in different places over time, suggesting that ideas may have travelled between communities through encounters like this one. An older hunter from the visiting group kneels beside a stone core from your camp. Without speaking much, he demonstrates another striking angle using his hand. Your group's toolmaker watches closely. The hunter taps carefully with a hammerstone, and a longer flake breaks free cleanly. Several people murmur softly. Not amazement exactly. Recognition. Useful knowledge has just appeared. You realize the moment matters because information itself can improve survival. A sharper edge means cleaner cuts. Cleaner cuts save effort. Saved effort preserves energy. Ancient life often depended on tiny advantages repeated over many seasons. The hunter hands the flake back with calm simplicity. No performance, no arrogance, just skill passing briefly from one person to another. One fascinating pattern visible across prehistoric human history is the gradual accumulation of shared knowledge. Humans did not survive because every generation started from nothing. They inherited techniques, observations, and habits from earlier people, then adjusted them slightly for new conditions. Nearby, several women compare gathered plants laid out on hide coverings. One points toward a root your group collected earlier and shakes her head gently. Then she gestures toward another similar plant growing closer to rocky soil. She breaks one open, revealing a paler interior. Your group watches carefully. Safer. Better tasting, perhaps. Less dangerous. The lesson travels instantly through attention alone. You think about how fragile knowledge really is. One person dies unexpectedly, and certain memories disappear forever. A root forgotten, a poisonous plant mistaken for a safe one, a method for preserving embers lost after a hard winter. Human survival depends not only on discovering useful things, but on successfully passing them onward. The environment rewarded groups capable of storing knowledge socially rather than individually. Memory spread across many minds becomes harder to lose completely. A child learns from parents, parents learn from elders, travelers learn from strangers. Information survives by moving. The air grows warmer now beneath the afternoon sun. Children wander farther from camp before being called back. Several adults from both groups walk together toward the nearby trees, examining tracks and discussing something in animated gestures. Their words differ in places, but enough understanding exists for meaning to cross between them. You notice similarities too. The same careful watchfulness near darkness, the same smoke scent in clothing, the same scars on hands from stone and hide work, the same habit of glancing toward children before sitting fully at ease. Humans separated by distance still carry recognizable patterns. A subtle clue hidden in ancient genetic evidence suggests that prehistoric populations may not have remained completely isolated from one another. Human groups likely met, exchanged partners, shared knowledge, and occasionally merged over long stretches of time. The story of survival may have depended partly on connection between communities rather than total separation. One of the visiting adults removes a small carved object from a pouch. It is simple, perhaps bone or antler shaped carefully by repeated scraping. The surface carries shallow markings that catch the sunlight faintly. Several children gather immediately to stare at it with wide eyes. An older woman from your camp touches the object gently, then smiles, not because she fully understands it, because she recognizes intention inside it. Someone made this carefully. Someone carried it across distance. Someone decided it mattered. That alone creates connection. The archaeological trail becomes difficult to follow when studying meaning itself. Tools survive, bones survive, but emotions, stories, beliefs, and relationships rarely fossilize neatly. Even so, carefully shaped ornaments and repeated symbolic patterns hint that humans already valued objects beyond immediate practical use. The two groups eat together cautiously later in the afternoon, not fully mixed, but close enough to share warmth from the same fire. Meat cooks over coals while roots roast beside heated stones. Smoke drifts upward through branches into bright afternoon light. Conversation flows more easily now. You notice repeated gestures toward the hills beyond the grove, perhaps discussing weather, migration, animals, dangerous routes, water. The details remain impossible to know exactly, yet the exchange itself feels important. Knowledge is moving again. The children finally abandon caution entirely. One little girl begins chasing another between trees while adults pretend not to notice until they run slightly too far from camp. Then several voices call them back at once. The girls return laughing breathlessly, trying and failing to appear innocent. Some things truly never change. Researchers studying human cognition often emphasize the importance of social learning in our species. Humans excel not only at inventing new solutions, but at copying, refining, and teaching them across generations. This ability allowed survival strategies to accumulate gradually rather than disappearing with each lifetime. You sit beside the older man from the visiting group while he repairs a spear binding using sinew and resin. His hands move differently from the people in your camp, yet the purpose is identical. Pull, tighten, press, test. The spear must hold under strain. Human beings separated by miles, seasons, or generations still arrive at similar truths when survival demands it. The sun begins lowering slowly toward late afternoon. Shadows stretch longer across the grove floor. Smoke turns golden in the changing light. Some members of the visiting group begin gathering their belongings carefully, preparing to continue their own journey before nightfall. The parting feels quieter than the meeting, less uncertain, more thoughtful, an exchanged object here, a remembered direction there, a final gesture, a shared understanding that both groups will continue moving beneath the same enormous sky. You realize something as the visitors disappear gradually between distant trees. Human survival was never only about strength, fire, tools, or shelter. It was also about minds capable of learning from one another, watching, remembering, adapting, passing knowledge onward before darkness returned again, and standing there in the fading afternoon light beside a grove slowly returning to silence. You feel how humanity endured partly because information itself became a kind of inheritance, carried carefully across generations and landscapes alike. The visiting group disappears gradually into the distant landscape, leaving only faint movement between trees and the lingering smell of smoke drifting through the afternoon air. For a while, your camp remains unusually quiet afterward. People continue their work, yet attention follows the direction the strangers travelled. A child asks a question softly. An older man answers while tightening a hide strap around a bundle. Nearby, one of the hunters studies the sky for a long moment before turning back toward camp. Encounters like that do not vanish quickly from the mind. They stay, especially in a world where every new piece of information might matter later. The afternoon light begins softening toward evening again. Wind brushes through the grove in slow, cool waves. Leaves shift overhead with a dry whispering sound. The fire near the centre of camp burns low, while several adults prepare to move once more before darkness settles fully. You help gather materials scattered through the resting area. A sharpened stone flake wrapped carefully in a hide, bundles of roots tied with plant fibre, dry bark saved for fire starting, a length of cord repaired earlier in the day. Nothing here feels accidental anymore. Every object carries memory of labour. The rhythm of life in this era encouraged constant preparation because conditions could change quickly. Weather shifted, Herds moved, water disappeared, camps dissolved and reformed. Human groups survived partly by remaining flexible enough to adapt before problems became disasters. The group begins travelling again through the cooling woodland. The light beneath the trees turns golden now, stretched thin between trunks and branches. Dust rises softly beneath footsteps where the ground has dried. Insects move through shafts of sunlight, somewhere nearby. Birds scatter suddenly upward before settling again farther away. You notice how tired everyone looks. Not dramatically exhausted, just worn in the steady ancient way that comes from continual movement, carrying, watching, repairing, and thinking ahead. Survival here is rarely one enormous heroic effort. It is thousands of smaller efforts layered together day after day. One quiet detail preserved in prehistoric human remains is the physical strain carried by the body itself. Worn joints, healed fractures, muscle attachment patterns, and tooth wear all hint at lives shaped by movement, labour, rough materials, and changing environments. The older woman walks more slowly now than earlier in the journey. A younger adult notices and quietly shifts part of her bundle onto their own shoulder. No announcement follows, no discussion. The adjustment simply happens. The group keeps moving. Ahead, the trees begin thinning gradually. Through the gaps you can see open land glowing beneath the lowering sun. Grasslands stretch toward distant hills washed in pale orange light. Farther away, dark clouds gather along part of the horizon, though the weather near you remains calm for now. Several adults pause to study the sky carefully. Cloud shape matters, wind direction matters, even the smell of the air matters. People living through landscapes like these became deeply skilled at reading environmental patterns because mistakes could carry serious consequences. Choosing the wrong shelter location before a storm or cold front might cost warmth, fuel, or safety during the night ahead. The group angles toward a rocky rise overlooking the plains. It offers visibility. Dry ground, nearby trees for fuel, protection from at least one direction of wind. You begin recognizing the logic almost automatically now. Humans survive here by constantly evaluating terrain. Where will water collect? Where will cold settle? Where can predators approach unseen? Where will smoke drift? Where will children sleep safely? The camp begins forming again before sunset fully arrives. Branches are gathered, stone is arranged, hides are stretched. Children help where they can, mostly successfully. The one boy immediately tangles himself inside part of a carrying cord and must be rescued with patient amusement. The older man from earlier sits near the edge of the rise sharpening a stone edge while watching the plains below. Beside him, another adult examines animal bones carried from previous meals, breaking larger pieces carefully to reach marrow inside. Even tiny fragments uncovered by archaeologists can reveal patterns of food use like this. Cut marks, burning traces, and breakage patterns show that prehistoric communities often extracted as much nutrition as possible from hunted animals. In harsh climates, wasted calories could become dangerous. The marrow smells rich and oily when exposed. A child nearby watches with deep concentration. Soon the older man hands over a small piece. The child tastes it carefully, face serious with importance. The sky darkens slowly into deep amber. Smoke from the new fire rises straight upward for a while before evening wind bends it eastward. Far below the rocky rise, grass moves in broad silver waves beneath the fading light. The world feels enormous from up here, and yet the camp itself remains very small. Just a cluster of people, a few fires, some hides, a handful of tools. It seems impossible sometimes that such fragile gatherings could survive across generations. Yet they did, again and again, across deserts, forests, coastlines, mountains, freezing plains, and changing climates. Some clues survive only because fire hardened them. Burned seeds, charred wood, heated stone, ash layers trapped beneath soil. Without fire, much of this ancient world would have vanished completely from memory. The hearth preserves more than warmth. It preserves traces of human presence itself. Night arrives gradually across the plains. The stars appear one by one overhead. The air cools quickly after sunset. People settle near the fire again while evening food cooks slowly nearby. Someone begins repairing a damaged carrying strap using fresh sinew. Another adult rubs warmth back into cold hands near the coals. Children drift towards sleep early tonight. The long journey has tired them. One little girl falls asleep before finishing a piece of roasted root, still holding it loosely in her hand until an adult gently removes it and tucks the hide covering closer around her shoulders. You sit near the edge of camp looking outward across the darkening land. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the other group continues travelling beneath the same night sky. Other camps exist too, other fires, other children sleeping beside smoke and fur while adults keep watch against cold and darkness. Humanity at this point in history is still scattered and vulnerable, yet something is growing quietly, knowledge spreading, connections forming, skills accumulating across generations. People learning not only how to survive the world, but how to adapt to almost every kind of world they encounter. The fire beside you settles into glowing red embers. Voices softened. Wind brushes gently across the rocky rise carrying scents of smoke. Cooling earth and distant rain still hidden somewhere beyond the horizon. And as you stare across the vast ancient darkness, you begin to feel how extraordinary it is that fragile human groups like this continued moving forward at all, carrying memory and survival together through a world that rarely made anything easy. The night grows softer as the fire burns lower on the rocky rise. Wind moves gently across the open plains below, carrying cool air uphill through the dark grass. The camp has settled almost completely now. Children sleep beneath layered hides. The older adults rest close to the warmth. A few watchers remain awake near the embers, though even their movements have slowed into quiet routine. Above you, the stars seem endless, without cities, roads, towers, or electric light. The sky opens fully across the ancient world. Thin rivers of pale starlight stretch from horizon to horizon. Some stars burn sharply white. Others flicker faintly behind high drifting cloud. The night feels immense, but not empty. You sit close enough to the fire to feel warmth against your hands while cold air brushes your back. The smell of smoke has become completely familiar now. It rests in hair, hides, tools, and skin. Nearby, a branch settles deeper into the coals with a soft crackling sound. Sparks rise briefly upward before disappearing into darkness. The long journey through this ancient world begins settling gently inside your thoughts. You remember the river moving beneath broken ice, the careful shaping of stone tools beside morning fires, the smell of roasted roots after rain, children learning tracks in damp soil, red pigment pressed against cave walls, predator eyes watching beyond the trees, two human groups meeting cautiously through the mist, all of it connected by small repeated acts of survival. What survives today are only fragments, yet the fragments are enough to reveal something extraordinary. Humans 70,000 years ago did not endure because the world was easy. They endured because they adapted continuously. They learned landscapes, shared knowledge, protected children, repaired tools, read weather, managed fear, remembered stories, stayed close to one another when darkness gathered beyond the firelight. The older woman near the embers shifts slightly in sleep. A child beside her curls closer beneath the fur covering. Another sleeper murmurs faintly before becoming still again. The camp breathes in soft, uneven rhythms around you. You realize now how fragile everything truly was. A failed hunt, a harsh winter, an infected wound, a lost child, a storm arriving too early. So many things could have ended the story, and yet the story continued. Generation after generation, camp after camp, footstep after footstep across forests, rivers, plains, coastlines, and cold open valleys. The material left behind cannot tell every detail, but it speaks clearly enough about resilience. Humans carried knowledge forward through memory long before books existed. They created shelter from hides and branches. They carried fire across wet landscapes. They watched the stars and followed animal paths through unfamiliar territory. Slowly, patiently, they became a species capable of surviving almost anywhere on Earth. The fire beside you lowers further. Orange embers pulse beneath grey ash like slow breathing. One of the watchers places another branch carefully across the coals, not to build a large blaze, only to preserve warmth through the coldest part of night. Even that small act feels meaningful now. Nothing here is careless. Everything matters. You look outward across the plains one final time. The grass moves in silver waves beneath moonlight. Far in the distance, dark hills rest beneath the stars exactly as they did long before this camp existed. Somewhere beyond them, other fires burn, other groups sleep, other children dream beside smoke and warmth while adults keep quiet watch. Humanity at this moment remains small in number, vulnerable, scattered, yet already carrying the beginnings of everything to come. The patience to observe, the imagination to create, the memory to teach, the compassion to care for one another, the flexibility to adapt, the determination to continue moving forward even through uncertainty and cold. A fascinating truth hidden inside human history is that survival was rarely one grand triumph. More often, it was thousands of ordinary choices made well enough to reach another morning. Keep the fire alive, share the food, watch the children, repair the tool, listen to the weather, remember the path, stay together. The watcher nearest the fire rubs tired hands slowly before holding them toward the warmth. Smoke drifts upward around their face while the stars continue wheeling silently overhead. The moment feels quiet enough to last forever, though you know it cannot. Morning will come again. The camp will rise again. Bundles will be tied. Tracks will be followed. Children will ask questions. Tools will need sharpening. The long movement of human life will continue, and eventually us across unimaginable stretches of time. Descendants of people like these will build villages, cities, ships, libraries, observatories, roads, and machines. They will cross oceans, study stars, write histories, tell stories about the ancient past while lying awake at night in warm modern rooms. Yet beneath all of it remains this older truth. Once, long ago, human beings survived with little more than firelight, memory, skill, patience, and one another. The wind softens across the rocky rise. The fire settles lower still. Around you, sleeping bodies remain wrapped in hide and shadow while the ancient night stretches peacefully overhead. And sitting there beside the fading embers, listening to the quiet breathing of the camp and the distant whisper of grass moving beneath the stars, you feel the enormous tenderness of humanity's long survival story. Not a story of perfection, not a story of constant victory, a story of endurance, of adaptation, of fragile people learning slowly how to live within a difficult world without surrendering their curiosity, care, or hope. The embers glow softly one last time. The plains darken beneath the sky, and the ancient world, vast and cold and beautiful, continues breathing gently around you as the night carries everyone slowly towards sleep. The fire is almost only memory now. A few soft embers remain beneath the ash, glowing gently, then fading, then glowing again, like the slow breathing of the sleeping camp. Around you, the people of this ancient world rest beneath hides, fur, smoke, and starlight. No one knows what tomorrow will bring, but for this moment, the night is calm. The wind moves lightly across the grass below the rocky rise. It touches the trees, passes over sleeping faces, and continues into the open darkness. Somewhere far away, water moves over stone. Somewhere farther still, another fire may be burning beneath the same wide sky. You let the sound soften, the crackle of the last coals, the quiet shifting of sleepers, the faint rustle of hides, the slow whisper of the ancient land. There is nothing more to solve tonight, nothing more to chase. The long path through 70,000 years ago has brought you here, to the small circle of warmth where people endured because they listened, remembered, shared, and stayed close. The stars remain above, patient and bright. The plains rest below, dark and peaceful. The camp sleeps, and slowly, the story loosens its hold, like smoke thinning into night air. The faces around the fire become softer. The hills fade into shadow. The cold becomes distant. Even the ancient world itself seems to lower its voice, inviting you to rest beside the embers a little longer. So let the fire dim. Let the wind pass gently over the grass. Let the old human story continue quietly without needing you to follow every step. For now there's only warmth, darkness, breath, and peace. Sweet dreams.